This week, I welcome back Michael Shermer to talk about his newest book, Conspiracy: Why the Rational Believe the Irrational.
So what do we mean by this? Well, one of the things I'm trying to do in the book is diffuse the pejorative nature of the phrase conspiracy theory, as in, oh, that's just a crazy conspiracy theory, like it's a tinfoil hat wearing wackadoodle in his basement texting or blogging some crazy ideas. No, that's not what I'm talking about here. So conspiracy is two or more people or an organization plotting in secret to do something illegal or immoral to a third party or organization to gain an unfair illegal advantage over them. And so if you define it that way, then a conspiracy theory is really just a hypothesis.
This is Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Phetasy. I'm Bridget Phetasy, and you are welcome. You know the drill. Please subscribe, rate, comment, share, reach out, tell your friends, send smoke signals, whatever. We love your feedback and we want to hear from you. If you like our work and want to support us, the best way to do that is join Phetasy.com. You'll get access to behind-the-scenes content, outtakes, discounts on merch, and the ability to submit questions for some of our upcoming guests. Support your favorite scrappy little internet heroes at Phetasy.com. I'm addicted to making podcasts. I have ideas for 3 more too. I should just become a podcast producer.
Yeah.
I know. Rogan's always like, how come you have so many podcasts? I'm like, I just have a lot of ideas.
How many podcasts total are there now? Isn't it like a couple million?
It is, but I was watching when I had Chris Williamson on my show recently. He was telling me that your podcast is considered successful if you make it past the first 4 episodes. Most podcasts that launch don't even make it past 4 or 5 episodes. So even if there are 4 million podcasts, which I think there are now, I'm not sure how many even make it to 20 episodes. I think that's considered like 0.1% if you make it to 20 episodes. So it's definitely a very crowded field, but I still think that there's billions of people in the world.
There are, yeah. And I'm old enough to remember old school media back in the 80s and 90s where, you just had print and television and then like NPR radio that would talk to authors. But, few talk shows would talk to authors and so I did Charlie Rose and Larry King and, those kinds of shows. But you get, like 6 minutes, 5 minutes. Right. And those shows are tiny now compared to some of the larger podcasts. I mean, back in the day, Carson used to get 30, 40 million a night. I mean, but those days are long gone. I think how many people watch the Tonight Show? It's like maybe 1 or 2 million.
And it was the only game in town. So
right.
Yeah, there was not very much competition. And now I think it's interesting. I always joke about how podcasts will save the world because it is this very strange counterbalance to our short attention spans. And I was reading an article recently that actually the longer podcasts are doing better. The people who go like 3 hours like Rogan. But my husband has the theory that people just want to put things on in the background and that it eliminates their need to make another decision. So he's like, I used to just listen to Rogan and have it on in the background because I didn't have to make another decision about what to listen to for 3 hours. And I think that's a good theory, actually, when people just have kind of background noise on.
But if you think about like book tours, which I used to do, where you'd go to bookstores, I'd go to Seattle, Portland, Denver, San Francisco, LA, San Diego, kind of do the West Coast thing. And, maybe a couple dozen to at most a couple hundred people show up. I mean, I'm not J.K. Rowling where they're lined up at the door and around the block, right?
Dressed up in costumes.
Right, yeah. And how many of them actually buy books? Well, that's questionable. But on a podcast, even if you only have 1,000 people, which is nothing on a podcast, imagine if you went to a bookstore and 1,000 people showed up. You'd go,
it's true.
I'm thrilled. I'm happy to do this, right?
It's so true.
That's how I think about the new media now.
Yeah, you can't take it for granted either. I think that it's easy to compare to the people who are getting bazillions of downloads, but I don't want to take the audience that's loyal for granted, that is taking their time and giving you their attention And even if it's, on the low end of what's considered a successful podcast, 20, 30,000 downloads a week, that's still so many people.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, it might
Yeah.
not seem
Huge.
like that many, but it's like you said, if you think of how many people, actual people that is in one place, it's
Right.
a lot of people.
I mean, people make a big deal about Jordan Peterson goes on the road. He fills an auditorium of 2,000 people, and this is massive, huge. Well, you can go on a podcast and reach that many people. There's probably 100 podcasts you can reach that many people in a week, right?
Yes.
So,
I
it's
suppose I should introduce you. I'm with Michael Shermer, everyone. Welcome to Walk-Ins Welcome. We just got right into it.
yeah, yeah.
You're a repeat guest, though. My audience knows and loves you.
Returning
And
champion.
returning champion. I love the returns, though. You're here to talk about your book, Conspiracy. What a perfectly timed book, Michael.
I think so. Yes. Well, that's why I wanted to write it because I mean I've been dealing with conspiracies and conspiracy theories since the 90s when we started Skeptic because that's always been in our wheelhouse. But it's gotten more prominent, front and center on both the left and the right politically. All the way up to Trump in the White House with QAnon, rigged election conspiracy theory, and all the Pizzagate, all that crazy stuff. And then on the other side now we're going through with was the COVID-19 a gain of function research gone wrong at the Chinese Wuhan lab there, or what? That is a kind of conspiracy theory, right? So
Was Russiagate a conspiracy theory?
Yeah. Well, yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's get into it. So what do we mean by this? Well, one of the things I'm trying to do in the book is diffuse the pejorative nature of the phrase conspiracy theory, as in, oh, that's just a crazy conspiracy theory, like it's a tinfoil hat wearing wackadoodle in his basement texting or blogging some crazy ideas. No, that's not what I'm talking about here. So conspiracy is two or more people or an organization plotting in secret to do something illegal or immoral to a third party or organization to gain an unfair illegal advantage over them. And so if you define it that way, then a conspiracy theory is really just a hypothesis. This is what I think is going on. I think these people here, I just take Bernie Madoff. So I just watched that Netflix film about him, four-part series about it. So that guy, what was his name, Harry Markopolos, sort of glommed on to that there was a Ponzi scheme going on here. So he presented the SEC with a conspiracy theory.
Right.
I think Madoff and his associates are running the scam. That's a conspiracy theory. And it turned out to be true. Too late for all the investors because the SEC ignored him. But so anything like that, I think that the Russians were meddling in the 2016 election. That's a conspiracy theory. And it may be true, it may be false. So what I want to do is let's just take the emotions out of it and just say, I just want to know if X is true or false, or we can't determine it, or it's some probably true or probably false, something like that. And so when you do that, then it doesn't seem so politically or ideologically loaded, where you're insulting somebody by calling them a conspiracy theorist. And the reason is because there's a lot of conspiracies that are conspiracy theories that turn out to be true, right? I mean, government agencies, corporations, individuals, they really do plot in secret to do things to other people that they don't, that the people did not consent to, did not know about. That happens all the time.
I appreciate that you say that, because one of my kind of first questions that I have, and one of the questions that came from my audience, which I think is a good succinct way of asking it. He said, in your research and evaluation, has institutional use of the conspiracy label to manipulate society changed over the last 100 years?
That's a really good
And
question.
someone responded and said, I'd like there to be some concession that, yes, the term is a linguistic tool for framing rather than almost dogmatic dismissal cloaked as skepticism. It's almost atheistic, which is what I encountered when I said, after I got the vaccine, I got the J&J, and my period was whack. And I was like, I didn't get my period for 3 months. And that's very strange for me. And I went online and I was like, hey, is anyone else having issues with their period? And then all these women said, and then people started dogpiling me and saying that I was a conspiracy theorist, but in the negative way. And there's so much gaslighting,
Now,
on the
hang on,
cover.
aren't you a new mom?
Yeah,
That this was before that,
it
I
was
presume.
before that. So on the cover of your thing, it says why the rational believe the irrational. I was told, which women are often told, that I was being irrational essentially.
Mm,
And then
mm,
lo and behold, a
mm,
year or years later, all of this research has come out that
mm,
it actually does mess with your periods. It's not
mm,
necessarily something that's long term or has any alleged, clearly in my case it didn't, on
mm.
fertility, but it does actually affect it. So I think, how do you, I
Well, that
appreciate.
there on that particular one, I would just say it's that it's a hypothesis that the vaccine has this side effect or it doesn't. So let's check and see. Data comes in. Okay, it does. So you were right. I'm not sure that's a conspiracy theory because it doesn't say anybody was doing this intentionally. Even the Chinese lab leak hypothesis is not really a conspiracy theory in the sense that the theory is that the Chinese conspired to do this intentionally, as a bioweapon, and they leaked it, which would be pretty stupid to leak it in your own country. More like an
Right.
accident. But the conspiracy theory part would be probably cover up. They're not exactly
Mm,
forthcoming and transparent about their research, and what was the gain of function stuff going on, and what was Fauci's connection to that. So those are all legitimate hypotheses that it should be free to look into without the conspiracy theory label as a pejorative being thrown around.
right.
Right. Okay. To your audience question, that's a great question. You have a good audience, man. I'm
My
impressed with
audience is
the
so
way
much
they.
smarter than me.
That's always good because it
Yes,
elevates the host. Yes.
it does.
So the answer is yes, it has. Before World War II, the phrase conspiracy theory was quite common. Everybody, all the way up to the president and other foreign leaders and so on, and scholars, scientists, everybody used the term like I just use it. Like it's just a hypothesis. I just want to know if it's true or not. And so that research like on letters to the editor of the New York Times for the past century, from the 1890s to say the 1990s. So a couple of political scientists did a content analysis of those letters. And while most of them have nothing to do with conspiracies, the ones that do are pretty front and center and open about what they're concerned about, with mostly political elections being rigged or influenced by Catholics, Jews, Mormons,
Hmm.
foreign leaders, and up until World War II, most conspiracy theories were had to do with outsiders who were trying to control or influence American foreign policy and politics and so on. After that, it kind of started to shift toward the government itself was conspiring to do things. So this is sort of 1960s, 1970s. And it's around that time that the phrase conspiracy theory became more pejorative. And we think that has probably some source in the CIA itself and maybe the FBI kind of shifting the use of that as a distraction, sort of a
That's
disinformation.
That's so
And
meta.
it is kind of
The
meta. It is.
CIA is the
Yeah.
one who
Yeah.
made conspiracy theory negative.
and
My
and maybe
brain just
related to
exploded.
the JFK assassination. Like that's just a crazy conspiracy theory, as opposed to, well, we know foreign leaders. I mean, we know the CIA has been involved in assassinating foreign leaders. So why isn't it possible that they did that to us? Maybe,
Domestically, right.
or even the Russians did it, or the Cubans, or whoever. And in fact, President Johnson, pushed hard for the Warren report to come out soon, and to really try to to frame not frame to to convict really Lee Harvey Oswald as the lone assassin. And I think he
Mhm.
was. I make a pretty good case for that, I think, although I'm in the minority in that position. But so conspiracy theorists make much about the fact that Johnson seemed to ram this through. Why? Was he covering up something for the CIA or the FBI or whoever, or himself being involved? No, he was worried that the American public would think the Russians were behind it, or the Cubans, and therefore the Cubans is a proxy for the Soviets, and
Mhm.
that could escalate then into tensions of conflict and nuclear war. So he was just kind of nudging the Warren Committee to make sure that you get Lee Harvey Oswald is the lone assassin. Well, that was their conclusion. I think it's the right conclusion. But the fact that he even did that makes you wonder, like, okay. So what else was going on here?
So I'm not up to date, but hasn't there been recent revelations about the CIA's involvement in the JFK assassination?
Yeah, so there's been so there's the last kind of data dump of paperwork related. There's still a little bit left. There's no smoking gun in there about the CIA or FBI or anybody else other than Lee Harvey Oswald that I could see, and no one else has found it either. But that what's come out, and the reason I think they've withheld these documents is because probably what it would reveal is what the Church Committee revealed decades ago. That is the CIA's involvement in foreign countries, rigging elections, favoring fascist dictators over communist dictators. There's a famous case in Guatemala where the United Fruit Company had a monopoly there, and the new president, or whatever his title was, dear leader, basically said, all right, we're, this is not right. Our workers are being exploited. And so we're going to have unions, and we're going to, empower our own workers. And this American conglomerate just can't come in here and use our workers like this. And for this, he was framed as a communist. Mm-hmm. And then the CIA helped to overthrow this guy. I forget his name now. And they were nudged along by this United Fruit Company, this major, massive United States corporation. And so just that alone, wait a minute. So an American company got the CIA to help meddle in a foreign country election and leadership in order to gain an unfair advantage and make more money? Yeah. And, so when you start looking into the activities of the CIA, they did a lot of that, assassinating foreign leaders. I mean, Che Guevara, the famous dashing Che Guevara with his cap and his facial hair and all that, he was assassinated in Bolivia. No, wait, Brazil. But he was assassinated by foreign assets, but they were directed by the CIA. So, and there's half a dozen like that of people that are known. There's probably a lot more that we don't know, where the CIA helped orchestrate the assassination of foreign assets, leaders, and other people, activists, and so on. Or the FBI, COINTELPRO, the counterintelligence program, of spying on civil rights groups, of planting agents in some of these civil rights groups, the American Indian movement, feminist groups, civil rights groups like Dr. Martin Luther King's groups and marches. Half the people in these rooms were FBI agents, right? And they even tapped his phones. They, without a warrant, they tape recorded his sexual escapades in hotel rooms, and then threatened to blackmail him. We have the letter. Wow. You can just go on Wikipedia and look up the COINTELPRO counterintelligence program, and you can see the document, which was signed off by J. Edgar Hoover, the head of the FBI, that we should blackmail Martin Luther King Jr. He's a U.S. citizen protected by the Constitution. How is this possible? Right? So this is the subtitle, Why the Rational Believe the Irrational, because it's not irrational to think, the CIA or FBI, they could have done something like assassinate Kennedy or whatever it is you think they might be up to, because look at all the stuff they did that we do know about.
This kind of leads to my next question that I have for you. When I was reading the book, I love the intro, actually. I think it does a great job of outlining, all of the things that you're covering, which is vast. But you say, people who say they believe such conspiracy theories often have carefully thought through the evidence in each case, but instead allow it to stand for something else that concerns them, such as the power of governments, corporations, and institutions, or in this case, the police. You're talking about proxy conspiracism. Yeah. And African Americans don't trust the police. Anti-vaxxers don't trust big pharma. Anti-GMOers don't trust big corporations, and on and on. But my question is, what is your argument for why we should trust them in light of all of the stuff that's come out over the years?
It's a good question. Well, first of all, we have to trust our institutions, or else we can't have a civil society, right? We have to assume, or at least hope, with all the checks and balances, that the court system works reasonably well, that the police are not overly abusive, and that's why we should have body cameras and have people with cell phones, filming them and so on. We need that kind of transparency. But if you didn't believe it at all, like all elections are rigged, well, then why bother even having a democracy if that's what you think, right? So so I see the point of your question. It's an important one. We shouldn't just believe them, but we can't just dismantle the whole thing, just burn the whole thing to the ground like Antifa wants to do, right?
I agree. I wonder there's so much that it feels unfair that our trust should just be given to institutions that have repeatedly done things to abuse that trust. At a certain point, it starts to feel almost like an abusive relationship. And then you do start questioning, how do I know what's true and what's not true, which is the current moment that we're in, and why I think so many people are losing their minds.
Well, this is the point of having congressional hearings and investigations and committees to look into things. And this is what lawyers are for and so on. That's how it works. Otherwise, what's the alternative? Just turn to a dictatorship or something. Well, that's probably worse. So,
yes.
But you're right. I mean, if you think about like in a marriage or a committed relationship and one person cheats on the other, and it happens once, or you get caught lying or whatever the big thing is, it's like trust is broken. You can repair it, but boy, it's going to be really take a long time. And in this case, what we have is, well, just get rid of that person that was corrupt, right? And hopefully the institution itself, marriage in this case, or the FBI or whatever, you get rid of the bad apple, and maybe the institution itself continues. But you got to constantly have investigations and transparency. Yes. I mean, one idea I played with in the book a little bit is, I kind of joke about this with President Obama, because I liked Barack Obama. I thought he's intelligent, thoughtful. He seemed like he really wanted to be Mr. Transparency. We're going to close Gitmo, because what's going on at Guantanamo Bay is, and we have these prisoners there, and according to the Constitution and the Geneva Convention, whatever rules of conflict and so on, they're supposed to get a trial, at a reasonable period of time. Well, some of them have been there for over 20 years, no trial. Mm-hmm. Okay, how is that possible? So Obama said, okay, this is not right. We're going to, and by the way, we should get the troops out of Afghanistan and Iraq and end these crazy wars, and we're going to, in terms of nuclear weapons, we're going to end this no first use policy, which is a very, very dangerous. Having no first use as a policy is good, so that you don't just willy-nilly launch your weapons, or launch on warning, because that's a signal detection problem. What if it's a flock of geese and it's not missiles, and you launch on that warning, and then you launch World War III, right? So he pledged to do something about all these things, and nothing happened. Right? Yes. Even got the Nobel Prize, preemptively. Like, oh, good, let's give it to this guy because he's going to, finally get rid of nuclear weapons.
He wants to do it.
So I think what happens is they get, when you get elected president, they take you in the back room and they go, okay, here's what's actually going on in the world. Oh, crap. You mean, yeah, you can't close it. But I want to pull the troops. No, you can't pull the troops. But what about that base? I want to close it. No, I can't close that base. And here's all the reasons. And in the case of no first use with nuclear weapons, NATO allies said, oh, no, this Putin guy's crazy and he's dangerous, and this guy over here and this person there, we gotta have that sort of sword of Damocles hanging over them, so they don't start to escalate conflicts and up into tactical nuclear weapons and then so on. So he's like, okay, I guess I can't do it. Right. And that's just how it goes.
Yeah, that sounds like a conspiracy theory.
Well, it is in a way, because even, again, Mr. Transparency, Obama continued Bush's Homeland Security agency. They all do. And also
the Patriot Act.
The Patriot Act.
They all keep voting for that.
Yeah. And if you read what Edward Snowden, or just read the documents or watch his appearances on podcasts, it's like Obama was doing what Bush was doing, spying on U.S. citizens, listening to foreign leaders' phone calls, not just metadata. Yeah, right. So something happens when you get into power. I don't know what it is, because I don't have power. I'm not wealthy and I'm not super powerful. So I don't know what it is.
You're too reasonable.
I feel like I would keep my principles and integrity and honesty if I was president or whatever, CEO of a major Fortune 500 company. I don't know, but something happens. Maybe it's just the atmosphere, the environment that's corruptive. Maybe that power just goes to people's heads. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Maybe there's something there, but that's why we have to have all those checks and balances, or else. And back to Bernie Madoff, it's like, how is it the SEC? That's their job. Literally, their day job is to look out for people like that, and they failed.
But
Why?
didn't we just have another example of this with
Sam Bankman-Fried. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah,
So
I know.
I mean,
I
how
I
many
know.
times do we have to let, these people get absolutely bamboozled? Although it was even people like Tom Brady and Giselle, I think. But
Right.
how many times does that have to happen before there's someone says this is not good for you?
Right.
But
Steph
again, then
Curry.
there's that balance of letting people make their own mistakes. You don't wanna I have a big
Mhm.
problem with big government thinking it always knows what's best for people, but in this instance, when people are being swindled by these pyramid schemes, it feels like at some point someone should have stepped in and said, "Stop giving your money to these charlatans."
Mhm. Yeah, well, that's what the SEC's job literally is, and the reason we have the banking system and the Federal Reserve and the FDIC and all that is because of what happened in the Great Depression, and also other the 1987 collapse in what was it, October 29th, 27th or something like that. Anyway, all these government institutions step in and say, okay, we're going to protect your money. This FDIC, we're insuring your accounts, because if they didn't do that, then there'd be runs on banks all the time. People would just at the drop of a hat, with any kind of moral panic or economic panic, people would just go to the bank and take their money out. And that's what happened with Bernie Madoff. He could have kept going indefinitely had the '08 housing crisis not happened, which led to other stock market going down, and then people that he had invested with him, they wanted their money back, and
Mhm.
he just ran out of money, and the game was over. And same thing with Sam Bankman-Fried, I guess. I didn't follow that closely. I'm not a big crypto guy, but but it
'Cause
was
you're a skeptic.
it always seemed a little nebulous. Like, what are they doing? And
If I don't understand, yeah.
I'd read the explainers. I watched the little videos.
I
Okay,
know,
here's how they mine for
I know.
these coins. I'm like, wait, but there's no actual coin, right? No, there's no coin, and they're not actually mining anything. No, they're not mining. It's a metaphor. It's like, I
No,
don't
but they
know.
are mining something because they're using an insane amount of power to mine whatever they're mining. It's a
Yeah,
very I
computer.
never understood it, and that doesn't mean that it's not real because a lot of people say the Sam Bankman-Fried, this is a conspiracy, was basically a plant to kind of undermine the idea of crypto because crypto is so decentralizing. So he
Hmm.
was
Hmm.
kind of planted by the powers that be to undermine faith in this thing that could
Mm,
disrupt the
mm.
financial global institutions.
I haven't heard that. That's a conspiracy theory that he's a plant of somebody put
Or
him there.
that this was the kind of plan all along, was
Oh,
the reason
plant.
that
Oh, the plant. Yeah, yeah,
they
yeah.
allowed this to go as far as it went. No, they allowed him they looked the other way, basically, so that in his Ponzi scheming, because they knew
Maybe.
that then
Yeah,
they could
maybe.
use him to say, "See, crypto is bad."
Yeah. Yeah, well, he did have the backing of a lot of famous people. You mentioned a couple. Steph Curry. I mean, if you're getting
Yeah.
your financial advice from Steph Curry and Tom Brady, I don't know, buyer beware, I guess.
Well,
uh,
this is one of the questions that somebody had in my community. Why should we trust our financial systems to people whose entire goal is to create more wealth for themselves and eliminate as much government oversight as possible by manipulating the Fed?
you shouldn't. That's right. You shouldn't. Don't. That's a good question, and the answer is don't. You shouldn't. Be skeptical. Yeah, always. I mean, it's all a risk if you just invest in the stock market, for
Mhm.
from late '09 through, I don't know, a year, 9 months ago or whatever, it was a bull market. It was great. You just couldn't help but make a lot of money. And now that's changed. Well, that's just the way it goes, right?
But the
And
game is rigged in some ways. I mean, we saw this with all these meme stocks, and then you saw all of the, the little guy started kind of manipulating the market
oh,
in
right.
much the same way that these big hedge funds did. And then the hedge funds kind of circled the wagons, and they started playing their own, golf boys on the golf club making their deals and all whatnot. So there is, if you feel like the game is rigged, and over the, I'm a child of the 90s, so I've been very like whatever cynical my whole life, I think.
You have.
Yeah. Well, I think anyone who kind of came up in the 90s, it was inherently part of our just
Mm,
thing, and then it's everything has been kind of progressively proven, not everything, but many things, like your government is spying on you, your phone is listening to you.
mm,
These are things that have, the game is somewhat rigged to all the insider trading that goes on with the House, all the members of Congress, which I don't even know
mm.
how that's legal. If you
It's not
have that,
well, it's not legal. Yeah. I mean, again,
yeah,
this is the SEC, they bust people all the time for insider trading. How like Nancy Pelosi and how some of these congressmen and senators get away with what they do, how they get rich,
they're
it
so
does seem.
rich.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the drivers of conspiracism is power. That is lack of power. People out of power feel that people in power are doing things, and often
But
at
are
times
they
they are.
wrong? Yeah.
Well, not of course. There are good people. We only hear about the bad ones, right? But probably most congressmen and senators most of the time are trying to do the right thing. They're not trying to cheat the system or whatever. But there's enough of them that do. You should be a 90s skeptic, right? So maybe cynical of the system, but is it rigged? Okay, let's think about this for a second. In a way, it's never going to be fair, because let's say I own 100 shares of Apple. Let's see what Apple is trading at today, and you own 1,000 shares of Apple. Okay, let me see. Where's my stocks here? Okay, Apple closed today at $130, right? So let's say let's say it went up $10 today, and so I own 100 shares, so I made $1,000. But let's say you own 1,000 shares or 10,000 shares. I mean, there's people that own 10,000 shares of Apple or 100,000 shares of Apple. You just made a massively amount more money than I made if we both sold our stocks. And what did you do to earn all that extra money that I didn't make? Nothing, right? And so
Right.
it, it,
That's true, but I think when you talk about things like shorting stocks, there's a perverse incentive to
mm, mm.
see companies fail.
Mm. Well, Elon was complaining about that, right? Because a lot of people are short stocking, and I haven't followed that this year because Tesla stock has collapsed about 70% in the last, I don't know, year. No, it was about 9 months, I guess. And so if you were short selling Tesla, they probably made a boatload of money. It's
Mhm.
legal. It's totally legal. Yeah. Is it
Yep.
good for the system? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's,
But that's where I feel like when I say it feels rigged, and why I think something that exposed that was these meme stonks,
mm,
was that they were playing these investors' game. They were shorting these stocks, and they knew that these that all of these hedge funds had to cover this, and they couldn't. And actually, some went bankrupt, but then they ended up kind of circling the wagons, and then all of these um the like day trading sites where people weren't able to trade, they stopped their ability to trade, and it was BS like that. Just because
mm,
they figured out how to, and everyone was like, oh, they're manipulating the system. Like, you guys
mm,
manipulate the system all the
mm,
time, but they just didn't like that they were kind of being beat at their own game. And that was a moment to me that was very much it felt very revealing. And interestingly enough, it was all of these kids who parents lost their houses in 2000. They went through all of this strife in the 2008 crisis, and they were often the kids who were kind of behind jumping on this wagon. A lot of them lost their shirts and their life savings, but um it was interesting. That was an interesting moment for me, and a lot of this revealing like the distrust in the systems. And I've been talking about this nonstop, why I think your book is so important, because it is actually compassionate. Because, one of the interesting phenomenons that I was witnessing, and I believe you've been on my friend's podcast that's all about this conspirituality, but
Mm.
the
Oh yeah.
Wu to Q pipeline,
Mm.
that's fascinating to me. So during the lockdowns and I started seeing a lot of overlap in my hippie. I have a lot of yoga
Mm.
friends, and there's just all this overlap of, it was very strange. Suddenly it started to become uh like people, they were kind of primed for a lot of the Q stuff
Mm.
because they were already anti-vaxxers,
Mm-hmm.
and I watched a lot of pretty reasonable people who might have had some kind of harmless woo beliefs, or other than they're kind of not vaccinating their kids against measles. Um, you know, there were some that were just harmless, and then it seemed like it just took this outsized influence more and more. And I've seen this on Twitter too, just good, really smart people kind of lose their minds.
Mm.
How does and I maybe I lost my mind and I don't know it. How do
Can you
you
tell? Yeah.
how do you
Yeah.
keep yourself, how do you know if you're being rational or irrational?
Yeah. Yeah. So I have a whole chapter on that, how you detect a conspiracy. Again, it's a signal detection problem. I have a theory. Is it true or not? Like any scientific hypothesis, you got to test it somehow or ask certain kind of critical questions, like how many people would have to be involved. Again, like the Madoff, let's use that as an example. He had a legitimate trading business on the 17th floor of the so-called Lipstick Building in New York City. And then he had this other group of people on the 19th floor, which was running the Ponzi scheme. And there was just a couple that were in on it, just a few. And if you have a small group like that, you can keep a conspiracy going and quiet for a long time. But the more people that have to be involved, like 9/11 is an inside job. Come on. I mean, there'd be like hundreds or thousands of people going into the World Trade Center building every day, breaking through drywall like behind me, planting the explosive devices on the steel beams inside, and no one noticed, right? And there's police walking around, security guards, and so on. How'd they get in there? And not one of them wants to go on Joe Rogan or the Tonight Show and go 60 Minutes. You're not going to believe. I have this friend, and he was in on it. Or some a disgruntled spouse.
That's a really good point.
I was married to this guy, and he was in on it. Now I don't like him, and here's the check, the check cash from the CIA or whoever. There'd be a
I
paper
think the
trail.
best point you've made, that's a hilarious point, and is that, like, definitely a 9/11 involved in that conspiracy would have been on Rogan by now.
Totally, of course, because that's where you go, right? Or just the WikiLeaks back to Snowden, and of the millions of classified documents revealing some pretty horrible things about what our military and government have been up to. There's nothing in there about 9/11 as an inside job. Bush knew about it. Nothing like that, which you would predict if there was a paper trail of some kind. A lot of the stuff that we learned about the CIA in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, what I talked about earlier, came about because of congressional investigations into JFK conspiracy theories about, was he assassinated by whoever besides Lee Harvey Oswald. That's how those things came out, right? So, usually there's somebody who can't keep their mouth shut. And that's how we find out. That's, whistleblowers or disgruntled spouses or employees that were in on it, and now they're not, or they heard about it, but there's been nothing like that, right? So, and the grander in scope the conspiracy theory is, the less likely it is to be true. Again, real conspiracies have to do with, just wanting to have power or money for me, for my company, or my department, right? Snowden talks about this. Like when he was on Rogan's show, I show this clip in my class because it's so classic about conspiracies. Like, because Joe loves conspiracy theories, and Snowden's like, let me tell you how it really works. These are just paper pushing bureaucrats in the government trying to keep their jobs.
Yeah.
And if they escalate the threat from terrorism, then the budget goes up. If they go, look, we're doing our job so good, there's no more terrorism threat. Well, then what do we need to fund your department for, right? So are they lying, really conspiring? Well, it's really more just kind of bureaucrats competing for budgets and their jobs. And, there's no cigarette smoking man behind closed doors going, we're going to take over the world. Right. And, so again, the more people, the more components, the grander in scope, the less likely the conspiracy theory is to be true. Like Bill Gates was chipping people through vaccines. That's why he was backing them, so they could track the world population. Well, that is not true. But, if you have one of these, you are being tracked, right? It's already happened.
My favorite meme in the entire world is Bill Gates, and he's like, let's make more vaccines, Bill Gates. And it's like, no, you will put microchips in our bodies and track us. And then Elon Musk, I will literally put a microchip in your brain, and it's like laughing my ass off. Nice.
That's funny. Right.
He's literally saying, I want to put a microchip in your brain, and all the dudes are like, all right, where do I sign?
Yeah.
So that was something that was it illustrated just like we can be so illogical. We're humans, I get all these letters from the politically homeless, and people often love reading them, but I have kind of a group of people that loves being like, all right, let me break down where none of this makes sense. But I think the people who fall in this politically homeless area feel very part of what happens is the loss of faith in a lot of the institutions, and you get pushed one way or another way. And it's a lot of the stuff is not logical. You're not coming to, I don't think when you feel like you can't trust anything, you come to very good conclusions, which is why I was saying how I don't know how to do it. I try to be more skeptical. My husband is very skeptical, which is a nice balance. I think I'm more like Joe. I just love conspiracy theories.
Well, there is an entertaining value to it.
They're so funny.
They're fun, and also they're kind of empowering or
Sometimes.
engaging, because it makes you feel like you have an inside track on a complex system that's almost impossible to understand. Try to understand economics. We just touched on it. I don't really understand economics. But there's people with PhDs who have completely different opinions about why inflation is happening, or why we shouldn't or should raise interest rates to lower inflation, and so on and so forth. It's like, okay, well, if these guys don't understand it, then how does anybody understand it?
Right.
But maybe it's 12 guys called the Illuminati in London who are running the world, and they're controlling the economy, or it's an Elon Musk or a Bill Gates kind of person doing that. It's easier to think about it that way, because it kind of gives you an inside track, like, oh, so that's what's going on. All right. And so there was, I worked on this Netflix show, a series, one of these explained series on brainwashing.
Ancient aliens?
No, they won't have me on. I volunteered. I said, I'll be on your show. I'm glad. But they're not interested in having me on there. Because it's not really about finding out what they really are. It's really just about well, anyway, you know what it is. So, but back to my story. So we found this woman on brainwashing. Found this woman who was a highly successful entrepreneur, well-educated, obviously intelligent, happily married, attractive woman, started her own PR business in Dallas. And then COVID hit, and then her business basically collapsed. And so she's just home, drops the kids off at school, and she's home all day online and goes down the QAnon rabbit hole. And to the point where she actually played this on the show. She had recorded her husband giving her an ultimatum. It's me and the kids or QAnon. What are you going to do? And she's like, I'm going for QAnon. Oh my God, this is the most important thing I'll ever do in my life. I mean, there's a deep state, and I now know what's going on in our government. And there's this whole, this pedophile thing, the QAnon Pizzagate, all that stuff. And Trump is going to put a stop to this. It's this crime is going on. And now I know what's really happening, and I'm going to do something about this. This is the most engaging, important thing I'll ever do in my life. She finally came to her senses and went, wait a minute, I'm not going to give up my husband and kids for this. And so she was able to tell us the story, but she said it was just so, just engaging, like, oh my God, just my moral sense of right and wrong. And I'm just going to get in there. Because most of us have fairly mundane lives. We're not the mayor or the governor or the president or a senator or a congressman or somebody highly influential, CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Most of us just have kind of regular lives. So if you're given this opportunity,
as you were
right?
naming all those people in my brain, I was like, so we're not crooks.
Yes, okay, well, all right, yeah. We're the good people.
So we're
Right.
just average citizens being duped. Okay, keep going. So we're the rubes.
It's a fair point. Yes, the rubes are the good ones. Yes. But again, I think back to the subtitle of the book, why the rational believe the irrational. Most people are rational about most things in their lives. This is the reality mindset. They can keep gas in the tank and money in the bank, take the kids to school, they're married, have a family, have a job, a career, and life just goes on. Like, look at the people that showed up on January 6th. They were not, these kind of ne'er-do-wells, wackadoodle, tinfoil hat wearing crazy people. No, they were regular. Actually, some of them were very successful. They flew there on their private jets, right?
Yeah.
They were there because
Patriots.
this was, this is the most important. This is my 1776 moment, one of them said.
Mm.
Like, I get to be John Adams or Franklin or Jefferson or Washington. I'm like one of the, this is huge. This is bigger than anything I'll ever do kind of attitude. And in that sense, then people do lose their rationality. But not even that completely, because if you really believe that the election was rigged, the boss said so. Yeah, but what about AG Attorney General Bill Barr said no? Well, what does he know? And he's a rhino. And anyway, so they wrote that off. So it's a little bit like the analogy I used, the Edgar Welch, the guy that went to the Comet Ping Pong Pizzeria in Washington, D.C. with his gun to break up the pedophile ring. In a way, that is what you would do if you knew there was a crime being committed,
right,
and no one would do anything about it. Right. So when somebody says, yeah, I think that could, they tell a pollster, yeah, I think there's something to the Pizzagate thing, because a lot of people did tick that box, but they don't really believe it like someone like an Edgar Welch did. Right. Because they're like, yeah,
right.
There's this horrible pedophile ring and I think Hillary's in on it. Come on, do you really think that? I mean, so this is what I call proxy conspiracism. They don't like Hillary. They don't like the Clintons, the Democrats, the libtards, and those people over there are bad people. Now, I don't know if the Pizzagate thing is true or not. That's kind of beside the point. It's that we know these are bad people, such that if I took you to the Comet Ping Pong Pizzeria and showed you, look, there's no pedophile ring here. You can see there's not even a basement. You're not going to go, oh, in that case, I'll vote for Hillary. You were never going to vote for Hillary, right? So it's kind of a stand-in for something else that you don't like or you're concerned about.
And I joke that they're kind of fun until they're not. They start World War I as an example that you give in your book, but also just there. I've read stories about guys killing their family because they went down the Q rabbit hole completely. At least one story I've read about this. And I do worry, you talked about 9/11, and I have a stand-up routine about how, like, you'll go online to pay your bill, basically, and then I walk through, like, you lose the entire day, and basically all rabbit holes lead to 9/11 was an inside job. Like, if you're at that point, you've been on the internet too long and you need to log out, but you are like, how did those towers fall down? And you're watching the movie, whatever that movie is.
Loose change, yeah.
And you're wondering all the things you wonder. And is the internet fueling, obviously, the lady who stayed at home and started believing in Q? You see this, and it's not just on, there's a lot of election denialism on the left too. There's just tons of people who say that this was not real and it didn't work, and a lot of people on all sides believe, it's all just a hoax.
So the phrase that's used there is conspiracy theories are for losers, in the sense that the political party that loses the election tends to think the other side was up to some no good. And Democrats have done that just as much as Republicans. If you go back, say, 50 years or 75 years, say post World War II, there's always the idea the other side cheated. Normally what happens, though, is after a few weeks or your candidate concedes and then we start thinking about the next election, then they drop the conspiracy theories. What's different about Trump is he never dropped it. He still continues to say that.
But did Hillary ever really drop it either? That, like,
well,
Russia,
she conceded, but the Russiagate
she
thing
conceded, but
the Russiagate thing that drug on for years, and all those investigations and stuff, and they never really turned up any big smoking guns. Yes, the Russians
Mhm.
were using social media to try to influence people. Well, everybody does that, right? I mean,
I mean, this was my
politicians
kind of this was
politicians
my
hire people to
question.
do that, right?
Yeah, this is my question is the internet fueling mental illness to the point that
Mm,
people
mm,
are not able to maintain any kind of rational perspective at all? Because you can go find whatever you want to believe. You can go find plenty of articles and plenty of evidence to say, see, I have all
hmm
of these articles from, you know, like Bill Gates is trying to take over the world.com and and these are legitimate.
You better record that one before somebody else takes it.
But see, the problem is then you have the things that are like open conspiracy theories where you a lot of the stuff around Agenda 2030 and the ESG stuff and trying to get all these countries to comply with these global initiatives, and
Mm.
you're strong arming farmers into using certain fertile. Those things are happening openly,
Yeah,
and
so that I wouldn't call a conspiracy theory because it's open. It's like politicians are trying to influence the election through social media. That's not really a conspiracy. They're not. Doing it openly. I mean, Obama hired somebody, because he was one of the first to really effectively use social media. See, that
mhm.
was '08, right? I mean, Facebook
The
started in
army was
'07.
recruiting on TikTok live before we got on this call.
Really?
So yeah.
Well, it's like, again, like the Twitter files. The CIA and the FBI were, kind of trying to influence Twitter. Well, of course they are. That's what they do, right? They try to manipulate all kinds of media because that's their job. Now you could say, well, Twitter shouldn't have allowed that. Yeah, okay, fine, but don't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised to hear those sorts. I'm not surprised to hear those things
But
going
how
on.
do you inoculate? Like, what is
I
the
don't. Yeah, I know that's a
how do
hard
you
one.
inoculate yourself
Yeah.
against this stuff? Because we're all susceptible to it. You're talking about confirmation bias, you're talking about echo chambers, then you have all of the things in your brain that work against this. And I loved that example that you gave because I just wrote my column actually, which is why I tweeted at you about I would love to hear
Mm,
from you on this. What
mm,
conspiracies have come true? Because I wrote a column in defense of paranoia, and
mm.
it was, there was a pedophilia ring. It just turned out it was on an island by a billionaire, there
Right, right,
with
right.
powerful people who came and went. That wasn't something they were just wrong about where it was.
That's right. Yes.
That's how I ended the article. I was like, they were wrong.
Yeah, I
They
like
were
that.
wrong about the pizza thing, but they were right about one thing. Bill Clinton was somehow involved.
Yeah, I
Um,
call that constructive conspiracism, or sometimes constructive paranoia, because sometimes they really are doing things, or they really are after you,
And
and
it's
so
like that part in your brain that you'd rather have the false positive than the false negative
exactly,
because
exactly.
it if it's I mean, women really understand this. I think going around always being hyper vigilant and aware that I could very well be mugged or all the things that women
Mm.
deal with. I look at the way men travel around the world. I'm like, you simple, simple man. The things you don't even pick up because you don't have to like be worried all the time. And I generally lead. My husband jokes that he lacks the like catastrophic thinking ability that I have. And I have to be careful though that I
Do you?
don't tip into,
Mm. You mean
just
you mean unconstructive paranoia? Yeah, where it consumes your life. Yeah. So your larger point is that women have to be more risk averse than men, just because of physical size differences and things like that. Do you
I
feel
think
even more
generally.
so? Do you feel even more so now that you're a mom?
Oh yeah, I've never felt more power like I already live with a certain amount of just like 360 scanning all the time. And I think it has saved me and men in situations that might have otherwise gone unnoticed because men have a certain amount of just obliviousness sometimes because they don't have to be on that lookout. But I remember even getting on a plane and it was like the gate, the little thing that connects to the plane, whatever it's called, I'm just blanking. It moved when I was standing with her,
Mm,
and she was 4
mm,
months, and I was like, What would I do if this thing collapsed right?"
mm.
I just
Mm.
felt so powerless, and how I felt I've never felt more just aware of all of the things that could go wrong in any given moment. So
I think that's
it's
true
funny
in
because
general.
so many women I knew
Yeah.
were obsessed with what was going on in China, and were telling
Mm.
their husbands to go get generators. I was one of these people. I was like, "This is coming to America. The world's gonna change." My husband was laughing at me. I was like, "Go get a gun. I know there's gonna be a line. We can't be in this city there." And he was like, "You are a crazy person. How many people do you think are gonna die, Bridget?" And I said, "1,000,000." I was like, "I think 1,000,000 people are gonna die in America." And he laughed at me, and he's like, "Yeah, I was wrong about that one." But
That's funny.
I was
Yeah.
just obsessed with and so many women I knew were just like down that rabbit hole, telling, getting their prepper. And I'm sure there were men who were as well, but I don't know if that is something that I wonder if women are more constructively paranoid, just by sake of having to always be somewhat more alert than men have to be.
I think that's true. It's probably overlapping bell curves where you have women more risk averse than men on average. There are some men that are going to be more risk averse than some women, and so on. But as on average, that's different. So I got a funny story for you. So, because of the rain and you're in LA, so you know what's been going on yesterday and today. So at the end of the day
Armageddon.
yesterday, I'm here at the office, and my wife calls and says, have you checked into staying in a hotel? I'm like, why would I do that? Well, the roads are closed and the boulders on 154 and the rocks may come down and hit your car. I'm like, I'm not worried about this. I'm just going to drive home. If there's rocks, I'll go around them. I got my gravel bike. I'll just ride my bike. What? No, we have a child. You have a responsibility. I want to be married to you for years. I don't want you to die tomorrow. I'm like, die? What are you talking about? And so finally, I'm like, all right, I won't come home. So then I get on the phone to call hotels, and every hotel room in all of Santa Barbara was booked, to the point where I, like, the 15th hotel I called, the guy just picked up and said, we're booked. I'm like, oh, okay. And
Wow.
I end up staying in an Airbnb that a friend of mine owns here in Santa Barbara. So it's like, all right. But I'm going home today because I'm
Your
going
wife was right.
to. Yeah. And the fact is, you saw that picture I posted on Twitter of all the boulders. And it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
she was right. So, yeah, I think there's probably something to that. Although, in terms of like conspiracy theory research, are men more conspiracy minded or women? It isn't clear that one gender is more paranoid than the other one. It depends on the context, really, and what the particular conspiracy theories are. Same thing with race. You mentioned, African Americans are more conspiratorial about vaccine. They're more vaccine hesitant recently, right? Because of previous conspiracy theories that turned out to be true, like the Tuskegee experiment
Mhm.
and other things like that. And whites are more likely to think the government is conspiring to take away guns and your Second Amendment rights and that sort of thing. So it just depends on the particular one
Oh,
that you're talking
interesting.
about. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't it's such a I want there to be a prescription. I don't know if there is. I know there's a whole chapter in your book too about how to talk to a conspiracy theorist, which I think
Right.
is important. I'm more I need that to talk to the conspiracy theorist in me, the first, because it is a very confusing time. It definitely, there were things that people were saying, using conspiracy theorists as a pejorative, when people were saying there are going to be vaccine passports, and
Mm-hmm.
lo and behold, every
Mm-hmm.
week we would cover the latest conspiracy in COVID when we were doing dumpster fire, and we joke like, if you play it backwards, it's basically just every conspiracy theory coming true or being
Mm-hmm.
proven to be true. Now,
Mm-hmm.
some of those, like you said, are just maybe the evidence wasn't out yet. Others, I mean, would there be incentive for people in power to be able to track every citizen?
Mm-hmm.
Probably.
Well, as I mentioned, the tech companies are already doing this. They already track us. They know
Of
everything.
course, but it's not the same as your government
No,
tracking you
that's right.
and
That's
forcing
right.
you to have certain. I mean, who's to say that it's not now? it slips into it like the Chinese social credit system,
Mm-hmm.
which is a very real thing. So how do we, people who are like, this is a slippery slope into social credit, and they're like, just calm down, you whack job. And then there was
Yeah.
a case just this past week that we covered on Dumpster Fire of a woman who got facially profiled going to the Rockettes with her daughter, and she's doing a lawsuit for the parent company against the parent company that
Mm.
represents the Rockettes or Radio City Music Hall. And she
Mm.
got booted out of the show because she
Really?
was
Oh my
working for
God.
the law firm that's
Oh my God.
yeah, this is craziness, and people are like,
That is
whatever.
crazy. Right. Right.
So I don't know. I
Well,
think
again, so
people have
let's think about this for a second. So, why are they doing this? Well, if you're tasked with the job of protecting American citizens from foreign and domestic terrorists or criminals or whatever, and so you're given a budget and power and technology to do something, you're literally going to spend all your time thinking of ways that people could do things that are not that you think or your department has determined is not right or not good for the country or not good for citizens or whatever. And so you're going to always have that tension, I think, between citizens' freedom to do whatever they want, and the government's job is to protect us in part. And you don't want no government, right? We don't want to be anarcho-capitalists and say, well, we don't need any police or military or a legal system or anything like that. No one wants to go that far. So the moment you set it up and go, okay, so we're going to have some kind of profiling that's going to go on by the police or by the Homeland Security, and they can't screen everybody, but they can screen some. So the moment you set that up, you're going to have some criteria, and it's going to look like some kind of conspiracy is going on. And I don't see any way around that other than, because you asked what can we do about it, and the internet's making it worse for sure. But what? Just break up the tech companies, or massive government regulation of
right.
Twitter and Facebook. Well,
No, we don't
you
want
mentioned
that.
you mentioned you don't like the idea of big government, but you're saying, well, what can we do about it? The answer may be nothing,
No,
or
I mean, what
that you.
can we do about not falling? I think that there's so much reason to become a constructive conspiracy theorist
Mhm,
that
mhm,
I don't know how to balance those things. That this is,
mhm.
I guess it's my own struggle right now. The tension between being a constructive, conspiracy theorist and also not losing all faith in every single institution because I don't know how you exist in that place. You
Yeah,
can't really,
right,
it's hard to
right.
function. And I honestly see I think this is the tension that is causing people to lose their minds, because it's easier to just, isn't that why we have conspiracy theories? It's to try and make sense of our world.
Yes,
Well,
yes,
we live
yes.
in like a pre-Mageddon. It's like we
Oh my
live in
god.
a
Oh my god, I love
pre-dystopia.
that word. I want that word. I may steal that. That's
I use
good.
it a lot. I use it a lot,
I like
pre-Mageddon.
that. I like that.
But
Of
it
course.
does feel like we're living sometimes in the movie that happened before V for Vendetta, the
Right,
prequel to V for.
right,
So
right,
in
right.
that time when it feels very dystopian a lot, and we're living in what feels like a kind of creepy science fiction, and
Mhm,
we have deep fakes and G chat
mhm.
and AI, and um how does the average person stay sane?
Yeah. Well, I mean, short of just telling people stay off social media,
Touch grass.
yeah, exactly. I mean, that's not very, very realistic. So, well, multiple sources of information. Just listen to different networks, or go to different web pages. Read op-ed pieces. This is my standard line. If you read op-eds from the New York Times, read some in the Wall Street Journal. Just listen to NPR, but check in on Fox News once in a while, and just kind of bounce around and try to get different sources. That's all you could do. I'm encouraged by the rise of fact checking sites like PolitiFact, Snopes, and there's a bunch of them now.
But even those have been fact checked and proven to be biased at times.
Yeah, yeah, I know. There's Bridget. I know there is no solution, right? I mean, we're just
Yeah,
awash in
we're screwed.
information, and short of just checking out, what'd you call it, pounding grass? Yeah,
Oh, that's
that's
like the
funny.
internet. That's what people always say when people are like clearly having a public mental breakdown on
I
Twitter or
see.
something. They always say touch grass.
I
It's
see.
kind of like it's
I
just
see.
it's like you spend too much time online,
I see.
very online. And I think it is appropriate. You know, there's something to be said for just being in the moment in the day. You don't have to worry about all these things, but some of these things are encroaching. And I know I've already had you on for an hour. So
Oh, it's all right.
what's your
I,
heart
I
out?
I have no heart out today.
So I want to ask some of the questions that
Yeah,
my
yeah, yeah.
readers have sent and submitted because I think they're really good. But one of them I thought was really interesting. Do you believe queer science to be legitimate science or pseudoscience?
Queer science. What do you mean?
Like the gender.
Oh, that. Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, there's a lot. Okay, there's a lot of unknowns there. So where there's unknowns is where people fill in those gaps, right? So how many trans are there really? Well, we don't know for sure. There's not a ton of data because this is just a kind of a new thing, right? Maybe it's 0.01%, maybe it's 1%. I don't think it's even 1%, but it also depends on what you're how you're defining the term. Like autism, right? There's this huge increase in autism, but not really. It's just that the category expanded to include more, to capture more people in that concept or that bin. And I think trans is something like that. I think it's probably probably a vanishingly small number. So if that's what they mean by queer science, I mean we know a lot more about homosexuality now than we used to,
Mhm.
and I don't know. So is there pseudoscience? Well, yes, probably. There's mostly just not a lot of science. So people are just making stuff up, or just being ideologically driven. I do
Yeah.
think there's two hypotheses about the spike in self-reported, self-identified trans, and that is the social contagion hypothesis, and the other one
Mhm.
is that society is more tolerant, so more of them are willing to come out of the closet. The counter to that last one is that then it should be across the board in all age cohorts. 13 to 17 year
Right.
olds, 18 to 24 year olds, 25 to 30 year olds, and so. And it's not. It's only that one age cohort where you see that 2,000% spike in self-identified trans. It's just those teenagers, mostly in young 20s, and more girls than boys, and so on. That would suggest the social contagion hypothesis, which I favor. But again, it's
There
just
does
so new. It's
Yeah.
just hard to say for sure.
There does seem to be a pseudoscientific element to me, this idea that you're kind of born in the wrong body. That's not necessarily
Even that is
something.
that's such a crazy idea. That's a kind of Cartesian dualism. There's me and then my body.
Mhm.
There's no I am my body. There's
Mhm.
not two things, right? You are whatever you are, and so there's no like male female brain in a male body. That just doesn't exist.
Mhm.
That
And
would
that
be pure
seems to be
pseudoscience.
kind of the running, that seems to be what everyone's agreed is true.
What?
That's what that this is just taken as fact.
Oh, okay. So probably what is being suggested there is that you have, brains awash in different hormones that nudge you to feel like more male or more female,
Mm,
and your chromosomes just gave you one body or the other. So there's, kind of competing, I guess, signals or information coming in of what you identify as. That's probably what they're
got it.
talking about. So there's probably something to do with that.
Okay.
And so how many again are there? This idea that we are not a binary, it's a continuum because it's not perfectly 50-50, and or however you want to put that. But even if it's 0.01% or even if it's 1%, I think people are confusing like the concept of rights and how people should be treated versus just the biology of somebody's brain and
Mhm.
body.
Mhm.
And it doesn't matter what the number is of trans. They should not be discriminated against. They should not be fired. They should not be, violence against them, and so on. Just like anything else, right? Just take that off the table, because what we want to know as scientists, what's the number? what's actually
Mm,
going on here? What's the role of early childhood? What's the role of hormones? What's the role of genetics and so on? And that should be able to be studied scientifically without the threat of being canceled or losing your job because you're a transphobe or whatever. Just take that
right.
off the table. So, I mean, every time I post something, I always say, by the way, don't discriminate against trans. That's not cool. Trans
I mean,
rights are human rights and so on. You have to say that because people are going to go, well, that you're even asking the question means you're a transphobe.
but that's a big part of the problem when it comes to scientific inquiry. I mean, I think these are good questions we should be asking too when it comes to, for example, what we're seeing in California, where there are men self IDing into the female corrections and all of the
Yeah,
problems that are coming along with that. It's fair for women and act, feminists who are fighting for the women in these prisons to be asking these questions, but they
yeah, of
immediately
course,
get labeled
of
as
course.
transphobes for even bringing it up.
Yeah, I wrote one of my Substack columns. What is a woman anyway? Just kind of based on that film,
Oh
or you could,
boy.
but you could flip it and say, what is a man anyway? So we have concepts.
Notice that's not usually the question though.
Yeah, why is that? Yeah, that's an
Because
interesting.
the patriarchy is so crafty. This is my stand-up routine. The
Okay.
patriarchy is so crafty, they will do anything to stay on top, and they are turning themselves into women so that they can stay on top.
I like that. That's good.
That's my theory, my working conspiracy theory.
Okay.
Um,
Well, but hang on. So, but what do these words even mean? If you say, a woman
mhm,
can have a 9-inch penis and a man can give birth to a child, then what do the words mean?
nothing.
Right? Nothing. So, yeah. So I mean, at least let's
You wonder
clarify
why
the
people are
language.
losing their minds.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, so most of us just shut our mouths. Like we just don't want to
Mm,
say anything. Right. I'm largely uncancelable, I think. So I don't worry about that too much. But I would be worried if I was a young professor somewhere, just starting
yeah,
off, didn't have tenure, or I was working in a corporation. I just keep my mouth shut. At Chapman, where I teach, every year we all have to take these online training programs. These are the dumbest things I've ever seen, but everybody has to do it.
yep.
And I know why, because the university itself has to protect itself, so that if one of the professors does something and they get sued, they can go, hey, that guy took our course. Look, on this date, he passed the course. So we're clear, right? So that's, I think, why corporations are doing that, really more for self-protection and legal reasons than that, this idea on the right that corporations are have gone far woke. I'm not sure about
I
that.
mean, they have, but I think maybe the reasons are different than what they might attribute to them. So I think I
Yeah, yeah,
agree that it could just be like they're afraid of being sued. But
right.
and also once you put in, people have mentioned this before, once you install a diversity, equity, inclusion division, you can't really get rid of that. If you put
Right, right. We're
without, once
we're
it's
now against
there,
diversity. Right.
yeah, how are you gonna get rid of the anti-racism group? It's not something that, even if the road to hell is paved with good intentions, as you're going down the line, you're seeing maybe this isn't working the way you thought it would work, and it's having, in fact, no, as they've done kind of a lot of science on this, they show that these DEI trainings really don't do
Yeah,
anything to
worthless.
help.
Completely worthless.
Even
And
if you recognize that and see that, it would be very hard to be like, well, we're dismantling DEI.
I mean, like in the academy, almost everybody is uber liberal. They're far left, they're
Mm,
progressive, they're socialist, whatever. I mean, they are tolerant. They want diversity. So who are these training programs for? I mean, because they're already in favor of all this, right? So, and if you have a handful, I don't know, 1% or 0.01% of just racist, misogynist assholes that are still around, you think they're going to change their mind by taking this course? They go,
no.
oh, I see. I understand. Black people are good. Women are smart. Oh, I get it. I didn't know until I took this.
That
No, because racist assholes are never going to change their mind, right?
that's one of the questions that somebody in my community had, actually, which I liked, is why are some people able to change their minds and or realize they were wrong about something while others will cling steadfastly to a belief regardless of any amount of evidence to the contrary? In your
Hmm.
experience?
It does happen, not usually not on the spot. Again, back to how to talk to a conspiracy theorist or anybody about anything. Rarely does somebody at the dinner table or wherever you're talking to them go, "Oh my God, that's such a great argument. I'm now going to become a Democrat instead of a Republican or whatever." That's not going to happen. Or I'm going to become an atheist and give up my belief in God. Usually, what happens is, if the most you can hope for is you just plant a seed of doubt, or you just plant a seed of just questioning, a little bit of skepticism. Just give this some thought. They go home, and maybe weeks or months or years later, they change their mind. Usually they don't tell anybody. That's how it works. And I think that's all you can hope for. People do change their mind. They do.
Yeah. I've been thinking a lot about this just in light of my own life lately. I've had a lot of people in my life going through breakups. And I was going to write a piece about how I'm just done talking to people who are going through breakups because they will not hear anything they don't want to hear. And it's like, it almost is like talking to a conspiracy theorist, just the way that they're making things up and living in kind of fantasy and remembering things that weren't true. And and you can say things and then they'll go talk to like a therapist or somebody and they'll come back and tell you exactly what you said to them, for years or days or whatever. And it's interesting to me how people just will not hear what they don't want to believe.
There you
I
have
mean,
to
I
ask
know I'm
questions.
guilty of that.
Are you giving examples, say, of a couple that breaks up and the one thinks it's entirely the other person's fault,
And
and they have reasons for that?
or the opposite, they think it's entirely their fault, even though you can objectively look at the relationship and see that it might not have been. One person's taking too much of the blame for some reason. I don't know. It's a lot of it. When you're in pain or you're afraid, it's easy to. It's as the internet kids say, like, it's a cope, that it's a way to cope with the pain or the
Mm-hmm.
fear or all of the things that might be coming up. And I see so much of that playing out online there's so much fear just about finances and global uncertainty. And there's lots of
Mm-hmm.
unrest and, people are, I myself am included in this, for instance, our gas bill. We got an email that was like, "Hey, your gas bill is going to be more than double what it would have been a year ago." And these freaking energy companies are like mafias. What am I going to do? I have no
Nothing.
recourse.
I know. I know.
Thanks for the heads up that my bill is going to be, instead of $100 in the winter, $250, which it was. Like, I'm not going to let my daughter freeze,
$250 in a single month?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the problem. Well, this is one of the kind of limitations of capitalism, I guess, is we end up with either monopolies or duopolies just by default. I mean, okay, so you're a new mom. How many diaper companies are there?
A
Two.
lot.
Really?
Oh,
There's just
okay.
two major ones, right?
2 major ones, but I think probably because 'cause I'm on Instagram, I see there's a lot of competition coming
Oh, I see.
out.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I would like to see more of that. But there isn't that much competition.
Huggies and
So
Pampers.
how, yeah, that's right. How many cable companies are there to choose from when you go
Oh,
into a
yeah,
city?
forget it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's we're here in Santa Barbara, Cox Cable. That's it. Used to be on Spectrum down south. Anyway, there's just not that many choices. So
Yeah.
what are you going to do? And it just seems like that's just the way it goes. In politics, we have a duopoly,
But is
and no,
that capitalism or is that cronyism? It
well,
seems
it's
I feel like that gets confused a lot, where what appears to be capitalism is actually rich people making deals to enrich themselves.
well, but that's kind of built into the system, right? Why does YouTube, or sorry, why does Facebook and Google and Apple, why do they own so many companies? Well, anytime a company gets slightly large and influential, they just get bought up. Well, why do they get bought up? Because the startup guy and the venture capitalist backing them are happy to sell for $200 million, and we put in 10 million. So yeah, we just made a nice profit. Thank you very much, Google. or Apple or Facebook or whoever bought
And
it.
they eat their competition.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
And that's totally, it's not a conspiracy theory because it's totally legal. It's right up front. I mean, that's what mergers and acquisitions do. That's, there's whole law firms that do nothing but that.
But
And
hasn't it
corporate
been
people.
shown that these cable companies will make deals with where they cover and who they cover so that they can all kind of have their own share of the market, amongst one another, basically eliminating competition for this is what the nannies in the Palisades do. They get together and
They
set the
do?
price. Oh, yeah. Yeah. They do this all over West LA. I was laughing about it.
What do they
I'm
do?
like, they don't have a union, but they basically are like a mafia, and they essentially
I mean,
set a
price
price,
fixing.
and they price fix, and none of them will go under that rate because they know. I wish
Well,
writers would do this.
that's
Writers are
good.
like, take it
Yes.
for free.
Yeah.
But it is good, but I don't think it's good when it's an energy company or a cable company and they're behaving like,
So when it's an
they're price
essential
fixing.
need, you need gas and electricity and water and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, I have one choice for that. One.
Right. Yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, there's
Yeah.
nothing I can do. And it's
Yeah.
so like none of it ever makes sense. If you look at your LADWP bill or you look at it, the way that the price increase or decrease, and it's some excuse because there's a freeze in the Midwest and gas. You're like, you could say anything. You could literally
Right.
be like, this is Putin's fault, and there's nothing I can do.
Right.
I just have to eat it. It's so wild.
Yeah.
But that makes me feel these are the things that I have to keep in check because it makes me feel powerless. It puts me in financial fear. And then I'm open to the idea that this is a massive conspiracy that is somehow afoot to undermine the middle class.
I always complain about this with the gas prices. It's like the local newscast guy is out there at the Chevron station, and it's a mystery why the prices are going. Why don't you just go inside the store and ask the guy, why'd you put the higher number up there?
Yeah.
And then he's going to go, well, my boss told me to do. Well, who's the boss? That guy. Ask him, and he'll go, well, the people at Chevron told me to raise. And then you all the way up the chain, somebody up the top goes, ha, we can make more money, supply and demand.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this is my point. That's their job, right?
Right.
I mean, as a corporation, as a CEO, your job is shareholder values. So we'd have to change the norms and values of capitalism to be what John Mackey calls conscious capitalism. That is, your stakeholders are not just your stockholders, but also, the citizens in the community that your store is at, like the case of Whole Foods, and the customers, your employees, that you want them happy. They should not have to unionize. You should just pay them so much and give them such great health care. They don't need to unionize.
Who is a big supporter of conscious capitalism? Sam Bankman-Fried.
Oh, no, really?
That was like his whole thing.
No, that you're thinking of effective altruism, right?
Oh, aren't they kind of the same?
No.
No.
John Mackey. Do you know John Mackey's the CEO of Whole Foods? Anyway, but he's kind of a hippie libertarian,
right?
And he's a vegan, and he really believes that what he calls conscious capitalism, like that CEO of Whole Foods should not make more than 19 times the average worker's wage.
Right.
Whereas at Disney, it's like, I don't know, 1,000 times more than the average worker's wage. Most of the Fortune 500 companies, the CEOs just make just an insane amount of money compared to the average worker. And that makes people feel whatever the right answer is. And I don't know what that is, but whatever makes your employees feel that they're being cheated, or it's just not fair, then maybe do something about it, because you'll make more money in the long run and be a better corporation if your entire stakeholders are taken care of, including the people that live in your neighborhood where the store is.
Right. I have some more questions. Just a few. This is from I have them from both places. I have them from Locals and Substack. So you have lots of people. I'm not going to be able to get to all of them, unfortunately, but there were some really good
Okay, let's
ones.
do the lightning round. I'll give short answers.
Okay. Lightning round. I'm wondering if he sees an uptick in America's embrace of conspiracy theories or if it's business as usual for us. If he does believe conspiratorial thinking is on the rise, when did the increase start and what does he think is fueling it?
Conspiracy theories have always been around. There's not more now than there used to be, but the speed at which they travel is much faster now because of social media and the number of followers you can get. The example I use is JFK conspiracy theorists have, used to, in the 60s and 70s, they just meet in these tiny hotel conference rooms and have their mimeograph newsletters, self-published books. That was pretty much it. And you couldn't have an audience. You mentioned loose change, the 9/11. That was the first viral video ever produced, and it was seen by tens of millions of people, and that really changed it. How many people are aware of it, think there might be something to it, tell posters, yes, I could. The posters say, do you think there could be something to this? Yes, I do. Those kind of numbers have gone up because of the penetration of social media.
Interesting. If you could wave a wand and magically make conspiracy theories and pseudoscience go away, would you?
No, because, well, this leads pseudoscience out. Just conspiracy theories. Again, so many of them turn out to be true that it's important that you be skeptical of institutions, and anyone with power really needs checks and balances. We really should be cautious.
Is it possible?
We'll call that the Bridget principle. Be a 90s cynic.
Is it possible for our scientific institutions, such as peer review and academic publishing generally, universities and scholarships, etc., to become corrupted to the point where people shouldn't trust the scientists?
Well, that happened in starting around 2010 with the replication crisis in the social sciences and the medical sciences, where something on the order of half of all published peer-reviewed, respected peer-reviewed journals articles were not replicable, and they probably should have never been published in the first place. And when people kind of looked into the data and methodologies, it was obvious they were kind of what's called p-hacking. For example, you have to get a 0.05 or 0.01 statistical difference between your two groups, experimental group, the placebo group, or whatever. But there's a way to manipulate your data set to get rid of the outliers so that the p-values shift in one direction or the other, so you can get that statistically significant difference between your two groups.
Mm-hmm.
And so, or you run 9 experiments and you just report the one that was statistically significant and you just file drawer the other ones and no one even knows about them, right? So now there's protocols set up, like you post online on this site, these are the experiments I'm going to run, this is the methodology I'm going to use, and I'll report all of my data right here. And that's a way, kind of an answer to that problem. But the answer is yes, of course it can. But most scientific fraud is discovered by insiders, whistleblowers. Usually grad students discover that the professor was manipulating the system or whatever.
Right. Sean Ono Lennon had a great tweet that I loved that said heliocentrism was a conspiracy theory.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it is. I always think of Ignaz Semmelweis.
Yes.
He was the person, that poor man. He went insane. Basically, they institutionalized him because he essentially found out that it was pre-germ theory, and he just found out that if he wanted all the doctors to wash their hands after they came from doing an autopsy to delivering a baby, and all these moms were dying.
Right.
And then he found, but couldn't prove how or why that was true. And they laughed at him, and he went crazy and then died in a psych ward because he got an injury and it went gangrene. I mean, it's like, it makes me believe that like God is a comedian or something. I mean, you couldn't even write this.
The problem, though, Bridget, there is that there's a selection bias. We remember the heroes in the history of science, Semmelweis, Galileo, Copernicus, Newton, Einstein, so on. What we're forgetting is all the ones that also had challenges to the mainstream theories, and they turned out to be wrong. And you never heard of them because they were nobodies. And I know, because I get letters from these guys. I call these theories of everything. They send me these papers, not just me. They send them to anybody that's a prominent physicist, for example. And it's like, oh, I've been working on this theory about the universe, and Einstein was wrong, and Newton was wrong, and Stephen Hawking was wrong. I figured it all out. I'll share the Nobel Prize with you if you help me with the math. And I was telling you're talking to the wrong guy.
Real interesting emails.
So what to do about them? What to do with outsiders? Like Netflix has this new series, Ancient Apocalypse, Graham Hancock's theory of Atlantis and this ancient civilization during the Ice Age that gave birth to all the great civilizations later. And those were not the first. There was this prehistory civilization. Okay, what do you do with that? Well, to me, if somebody wants to be taken seriously and they try to be taken serious, okay, let's evaluate the evidence. But the problem that he has is when he goes to somewhere like Egypt, to the Great Pyramids, and he wants to talk to like one of the leading archaeologists there, he feels like he's being shut out of the mainstream because he's skeptical of them. But I think what he forgets is that there's like 100 people like him. And how many outsiders, if you're an insider, you're the head of Department of Physics at Caltech or MIT, and this is the 200th person to tell you, oh, I think Einstein was wrong and here's my theory. At some point you go, you know what, I just can't deal with these outsiders, because who has the time? Right. So in part, that's kind of what we do, I guess, at Skeptic. But, sometimes they're right. Outsiders could be right. And the skepticism is appropriate, but usually not. Right. So
that's a good, I thought about that a lot after our last podcast where we were talking about psychicness, and you were like, well, we just don't remember the times we were wrong.
Right.
And I think about that all the time, and I forget to apply it to in this circumstance too. Yes, there were these guys who are right, but a lot of people were probably wrong and just quacks.
Yeah, most of them. Actually.
We don't hear about them.
No, but in fact, just to be fair, most scientists are wrong in they're just spitballing ideas, testing hypotheses. Most of them turn out to be incorrect, and you never hear about them because they don't publish them, because journals want articles that find something new. And another problem with the replication crisis is that journals don't want articles that replicate a study. That's boring. We already know that's true, right? So, but that's really important, because if you can't replicate it, or if you said, well, I couldn't replicate it, not interested, right? So there was this famous experiment by Daryl Bem, who's a highly respected social psychologist, who did this test on kind of backward causality. So the screen is split like our screen here, you on one side and me on the other. But in this case, it's like two curtains. And the subject sitting there at the computer has to push a button whether a image is going to pop up on the left side of the screen or the right side of the screen. And so the images were either neutral, like just a sunset or a landscape, and the other kind of images were more emotionally evocative, sort of pornographic or kind of sexually graphic images like that. Anyway, so this experiment found that the pornographic images were, the subjects were able to anticipate which side of the screen that emotionally evocative image would come up on before the computer even decided which side it would come on, because the computer just has a random number generator that says put it up on the left side or the right side. So these people are able to anticipate this. So his theory was that there must be something about pornography, and backward causality. So this would be, ahead. So like psychic power, ahead of time before the computer's even decided which side it's going to come on, right? So Bem ends up on the Colbert Report when that show was going, and Colbert called this extrasensory pornception, which was kind of funny. But what? Okay, come on, now hang on. What's more likely, that that 400 years of physics understanding the causality and time flows in one direction and so on, or that some social psychologist overturned 400 years of physics by showing porn to college students? I mean, come on, right? What are the chances of that being true? And ultimately, it was not replicable, and several people tried to replicate it and they couldn't, and they couldn't get those papers published. Right? Because the prominent journals are like, we're not interested. It's a non-result. It's like, yeah, but you published this one that was a result, and that got a lot of attention. Don't we have an obligation? Like, shouldn't the New York Times put their correction on the front page? Because they don't. They put it in, way in the middle in the back. Anyway, it's the same kind of problem in science.
Interesting. This was a fun interaction that I liked. Does he see any downside to being a skeptic, considering all that we have seen recently? It was a strength for so many decades, but in the last few years, not believing a lot of these theories can actually be detrimental to your health, finances, etc. If you simply followed rumor for the last, say, 7 years, you're way ahead of the pack. In other words, Occam's razor has been weaponized. It shields those with ill intent. And then someone said that don't attribute to malice what you can attribute to incompetence, stupidity
Incompetence, yes.
crowd.
Right. Yeah, I use that line in the book. It's kind of not mine, original to me, but it is true in so many places. Before you look for malice in some secret, power hungry cabal at work, just think maybe people are just incompetent, or maybe it's just randomness. I've been thinking about this because of clustering effects. Like there was you mentioned Ancient Aliens. They had a show on Sunday night on UFO hotspots. How come the UFOs appear over big cities and sacred places? Well, first of all, there's a selection bias. They're not going to appear over the ocean in the sense that no one's out there to observe them, right? So, and they seem to appear more over military bases and nuclear sites. Well, that's because there's more surveillance there. There's
Right.
more people looking out for it. But the larger point is clustering, statistical clustering, is that randomness is clustering. So if you throw 100 pennies up in the air and you just let them land on the ground, they're not going to be perfectly evenly spaced. They're going to be clustered. Stars in the sky are random, but they're clustering in the constellations. If you have 1,000 coin flips, it's not going to be perfectly 500 heads, 500 tails, but it'll be close. But in the sequence, there's going to be 6, 7, 8 streaks of heads in a row, and then tails in a row, and then heads, tails, and heads, right? So casinos depend on this. That
Right.
people don't understand the streakiness of randomness. My favorite example is that when the iPod came out and they introduced the shuffle feature, it will randomly play your songs for you. And customers complain to Apple, it's not random because some songs come up more than others. That's randomness. That is
Right.
what randomness looks like. So Apple, I'm told, had to program in the songs to be played no more than once before every other song was played. So,
Uh,
so people's intuitions about what randomness is, you actually have to program that to happen, right?
wow.
Yeah. And so our intuitions about randomness are not good. So we, see cancer clusters are another one where before you decide that the cause of this cancer cluster is that industrial plant that was there back in the 60s, or it was some company doing this or whatever, it may just be random. There may be no cause there. The
Mm,
cluster does not have a causal vector in it.
but it was probably the
Corporation.
corporation.
Back to your 90s cynicism.
Okay, this is the last one. I like this one. I haven't he said Scientific American used to be such a great resource for both scholarly people and the plebs to learn about scientific advancements and hear unique perspectives such as his skeptic column. He's spoken about the disintegration of his relationship with that publication and then linked to your Substack, Scientific American Goes Woke. And many readers see it as having gone over the deep end in regards to the politicization of science. I wonder if he sees a future when it could earn back some respect. Science has gone through paradigm shifts for centuries that are undoubtedly impacted by culture, but we certainly live in a really wacky media landscape these days, and I'm not sure if the old rules apply. Does it bounce toward one horizon or another, push you over the edge? Is Sci-Am just going through a phase that will naturally swing back to a more rational perspective, or is it toast?
Bridget, you're right. Your fans are such good writers.
They really we're doing Write Club in my community where I do a daily writing prompt, and I am embarrassed to be the paid writer in this group.
That's really funny.
I'm like,
Yeah.
why aren't you guys all getting paid for your they're so brilliant. It's just
Yeah.
I love
It's
it. I'm so
amazing.
impressed.
Yes, well, Scientific American is the most prominent example, but it's not the only one. Most scientific journals have gone woke, and they're just going out of their way to find examples. Like Scientific American ran an article the other day about the Buffalo Bills football player had the cardiac arrest
Oh,
on
I
the
saw
player.
that.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, this is another example of systemic racism, and it's just
Yeah.
so ignorant. It shouldn't even need debunking. Like
Yeah.
70% of the players in the NFL are black, so yeah, they're going to be more blacks getting hurt than whites by that percentage, right?
Yeah.
And it's not like having less melanin in your skin means you're less likely to pull an Achilles or tear your hamstrings or whatever their injuries are. So it's just ignorant. But what's really going on there? Are they intentionally lying? No. I think the people that work, not just there, but most of these journals, they are true believers. They really believe, really since George Floyd especially, that they want to do something about the problem. What's the problem? Well, there's still racism and misogyny and so on. Okay, yes, there is some still, less than before. but what should we do about it? And so here's my explanation. Most of us can't do much about it at all. I'm not the chief of police. I'm not a mayor. I'm not a governor. What can I do about it? Well, I can go down and march. I can protest. I can do something in my magazine. I can write an op-ed. I can blog. I can make a podcast.
Post a black square on Instagram. Thank you very
Yes.
much.
Exactly. Yeah, right. Capitalize the word black, but lowercase white. Like, I mean, the New York Times did this. Like, really? Seriously? I mean, you really think that's gonna, do what you want? Okay.
Yeah.
Or the pronouns, that people put in their bios online. It's like, what is it you think that's going to do? Because
it's a signal, though, isn't it?
It's a signal. It's a virtue signal. Yeah, totally.
What is your definition of woke?
Well, here I'll just go to the linguists like John McWhorter, who tracks it back to the civil rights movement and black groups and so on. It's just kind of being aware or awake to the problems in society. Okay, well, we're all woke in that sense. Like, yeah, we know there's some problems. There have been problems that were worse in the past. We've done something about it. That's a good thing. You should be aware of this. All that's innocuous. Right. But that's not what it means anymore. Now it means, social signaling, virtue signaling. And I think in a way, a lot of pseudoscience or even just lying for what you consider to be moral purposes. Mm-hmm. And again, back to what I said earlier about confusing whatever the facts are with what the values should be. And so, blacks and women and Jews and trans and gay, whatever, should all be treated equally under the law. Don't discriminate. And it doesn't matter how many gay people there are, 1%, 10%, it doesn't matter how many trans people there are. If they're U.S. citizens, they're protected by the Constitution. Here are their rights, and you should honor their rights. And it doesn't matter how much melanin they have in their skin or whatever. But people are confused about that. And they think, oh my gosh, if the number is higher, if we have more trans and everybody's a little trans. You probably saw that poetry that was going on. No. Everybody is a little trans. Everybody's a little gay. It's like, no, actually they're not. Most are not. Yeah. But it's an attempt to say, look, I want to do something. We should all be more tolerant. Yes, of course we should all be more tolerant. But don't lie about the facts in hopes that'll make people more tolerant. That's an incorrect inference.
And I think it ends up in, I always tell this story of in these weird, it's a good intention and I understand it, but I was in a 12-step meeting and this woman was virtue signaling through her whole share about how we need to do better in the rooms, and like the rooms are 70% white, and I was sitting there like losing my mind. I'm like, you don't hear what you're saying. What you're saying is we need more addicts of color. Like that's right. Literally what you're saying right now. It's right. It's just like, yes, America's 70% white, so it's pretty representative.
Right. Did you see Ellen DeGeneres' video last night?
Of the mudslides?
Yeah, well, she's up here in Montecito, and she's standing there on the drive, which all the mud flows came down 5 years ago. Yesterday, It was weird, but then she goes off on this thing at the end. First of all, she's just there showing the flow of mud and stuff, and it's like, wow, okay. Then she goes, so we got to be nicer to Mother Nature because this is what Mother Nature does to us if we're not nice to her. And then I saw Jordan Peterson posted a thing. So maybe we should sacrifice a virgin in a volcano. Maybe that'll do it. Are you listening to yourself? If we're not nicer to Mother Earth, she's going to do this to us. It's like, really?
I feel like she's going to do this either way. She's kind of been at this forever. This is kind of Mother Nature's thing.
Yes. Yeah, but yes, we need more people. I'll tell you one other story. So, like, during my book tour, I got a call from a NPR radio producer in Boston, and he said, "Hey, we're doing a series of episodes on trust and institutions, like the stuff you and I were just talking about. How can we increase trust in our institutions like science and journalism and so on?" I'm like, oh my God, this is perfect. I just wrote a book about this. He didn't know about my conspiracy, but he goes, oh, that's great. And, the last chapter is on, instituting trust in our institutions and so on. He goes, oh, that's perfect. I said, yeah, okay. So, what do you want to do? He goes, well, okay, so here's the problem. I mean, you're the perfect guy for this, what I'm looking for, but I need the black you. And I'm like, wait, did you just say what I think you said? He goes, well, what do you mean? I go, you mean I don't have enough melanin in my skin? Otherwise, I'd be fine. He goes, well, if you want to put it that way. I go, I am putting it that way because that's what you just said. Well, I just mean we need diversity. Like, what has it got to do with what you were just talking about? This is one reason why people don't trust institutions like NPR, because you say things like this, right?
NPR has become a parody.
Totally. So I finally said, okay, why don't you try John McWhorter and Neil deGrasse Tyson? Well, we tried them and they didn't want to do it. I'm like, okay, dude, this is not my problem.
Yeah. That's
But
crazy.
I mean, when you hear, and there's enough stories like that,
Yep.
people go, you know what? I am going to vote for Trump or whoever on the other side, even if they're not
Yeah.
Republicans.
I mean,
That's
the crazy thing too. I think that one has to be very careful of. And I know when I was kind of coming up in my accidental pundit years, which I'm trying to pivot out of.
Why? You're good at that.
No. I mean, I like making fun of all of it because of my very
Okay.
Gen X, like just malaise about all of it. But I remember being very aware that I had to be careful that I wasn't being reactive. You know, it's easy to just start reacting because you might say something and then your friends on the left are like unfollowing you, you're a bigot, blah, blah, blah. And the next thing you know, you've like reacted your way into MAGA. And I think that
Right.
it's easy. I
Yeah.
understand it. I get it. But it was something I had to be like, I had to be very conscious of that, you know, that instinct and that intuition. And I've said this a lot of times. I used to be like, why do people think that I'm MAGA? This was like in 2018. And a friend who had gone through this, but from the other side, was very like much a part of the Tea Party. And then through the Trump years was like, whoa, what's going on with Christians kind of abdicating their role and getting all on board with this guy who's a philanderer. And so he got kind of excommunicated from his tribe, but he said, it's not what you're saying, it's what you're not saying. And that was something, because I wasn't saying things when I was in comedy and trying to get jobs in writers' rooms, because I knew like, oh, someone will see this and they won't want me in their writer room because I'm a bigot or whatever. What I'm bigot in quotes, considered that. But then as this is the danger of audience capture, you know, then as you, it might be that maybe I just sometimes I'm like, I'm not going to go hard against Trump because literally everyone is like every single late night show, that lane is so full. And but it is something that if somebody looked, they'd be like, yeah, we get called MAGA Karens all the time on
MAGA Karens.
MAGA Karens on Dumpster Fire. But then in the same episode, someone will call us lived hard. So I think we're still making everyone mad.
then you're doing something right.
I don't know if I agree with that, or I'm just an idiot who doesn't really know what I stand for, which could also be
I don't
true.
know. We're so polarized that, you know, even if you tick 11 of the 12 boxes to be on that team, you know, you didn't tick the 12th one. Why didn't you tick the, you know, but this is the silence is violence. Why didn't you speak up about that particular thing? I don't have to speak up about everything, do I?
Yeah.
Yes, you do.
I don't know everything, guys. By the way, why isn't there a Ukraine flag in your, can you even point to Ukraine on a map, sir? Who's yelling at me online?
Really? Oh my God.
It's just like, yeah, we live in kind of, it's funny. I'm glad I have a therapist she's like a Nordic woman. So she's stern but fair, you know, she's very, but she also really understands and respects the absurdity of all of it. And I'm grateful that I can cry and laugh and have these conversations with her, but also she is like, life is absurd. You know, I'm like, I'm so lucky to have a therapist who deeply understands that life is painful and absurd, because she'll say she's not in the news cycle at all. She doesn't watch the news. At one point when there was an interesting point in our relationship, I've been seeing her for probably a decade now, and she didn't understand a lot of what was coming into her office because they were younger.
Really?
And I had to kind of like the student became the
through
teacher. She was like, what does this mean? What are pronouns? I was like, oh boy. This is gonna take a few
I
sessions.
you haven't you haven't mentioned the Nordic part of her too many times, have you? Because that could get you in trouble.
Oh,
She's
could
very
it?
white, too white.
Oh. She's
By the way,
just
did you run your that essay, that your now famous essay you wrote about your sexual life past her before you published that?
Oh, no, I didn't. She read it after I published it, though. You know,
What'd she say?
she loved it. I mean, I think it's something it's it took me a lot of work with her to even get to the point. I definitely have talked to her about it for many, many years, and I've
Mhm,
talked to her about how I wanted to write that essay. And even when I was trying to finish it after I read Louise Perry's book, my husband was like, "You're postpartum. Are you sure you want to be digging into this right now?" You know, and I'm like, "No, I need this. I have to
mm,
get this out. I've wanted to write it for years. I know myself as a writer. This will help me process things." But she thought it was something, she's like, without trying to say, "I told you so," it was kind of a little bit
mm,
like, "Yes, I was hoping you would get to this realization at a certain
mm,
point. I knew that all this bravado was just that." But
mm,
she just kind of had to sit and, give me space for that. But
mm,
I think it's like me, and that's where I really understand why she's a really great therapist, and why, as a friend dealing with my friends who are going through breakups, it's like, "Oh, I was this same way. I could not see what I could not see at the time."
mm.
And it
Do
took
you
me
agree with, the premise, the evolutionary psych premise that men and women are different in terms of their sexual, variety, interests, and number of partners they want, and how risk averse they are or not, that Louise Perry, in particular, in her book outlines.
I had a really, really great conversation with Brett Weinstein about this after that piece came out. And because, he's like, "Well, we hate to tell you I told you so," but,
Yeah,
he
yeah.
and I do think there is a difference. My curiosity or question is how much of it is evolutionary wired in women as self-preservation. So
Hmm.
there was such a high cost to infidelity
Hmm.
that maybe women are wired for monogamy because obviously it's just better for the child. So there's the continuation of our species, but also you might die if
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you're not
yeah.
faithful, very likely, or get stoned or burned at the stake, or even still we see in Muslim countries what happens to women who get
Hmm.
raped. So
Hmm.
I wonder
Or just STDs and pregnancy is dangerous.
STDs and pregnancy. So I wonder how much of it is just self-preservation, just
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
it's not like women don't like sex as much as men. And I think that's something that isn't always teased out. I think
Hmm.
women are just as sexual, if not
Hmm.
sometimes more. And I've heard the way my girlfriends and I talk when we're alone about things, and can be raunchy and crass, and there's
What?
there's a certain amount of purity that gets put on.
Mm,
That's what gets kind of confused. I've been looking at all my old pieces from Playboy, and it's like I wrote this piece that's not up anymore, but I still have a copy of it, about like she can be kinky and wife material. I think
mm,
that Madonna whore thing is something different than a woman's desire to be monogamous. So
mm,
it often gets
mm,
confused with like all this other purity, and the idea
mhm.
that she has to be kind of mm, not, what's the opposite of kinky?
Vanilla?
Yeah, that they have to be just this kind of vanilla, like
Just
very.
lie there placidly, right?
Yeah, so it's I mean, I think these conversations are very interesting. What's going on with men and women in the world right now, and the
Mhm,
backlash to that I'm seeing from my generation. I mean, the emails that I received from from that piece. The video I did reading it has like 100,000 views.
Wow.
It's great.
Wow.
The piece itself, I don't know what it's at now, but within the first couple of weeks, it had like 400,000 reads.
Wow.
It's
That's
crazy.
huge.
Yeah,
That
it's
is huge.
and the
Well, here's
emails that I've
let me
received.
let me tell you my reaction when I read it, which I also had with reading Louise Perry's book too. I was thinking of Danny Kahneman's concept of the remembered self and the experienced self or experiencing self, and that when you're experiencing something, kind of going through the experience in the now, you have one kind of response to it, and then later, years later, decades later, you kind of reflect back on what you did, and it has a different perspective because now you know more, you're a different person. And so I was reading that in Louise's book as well, and others. There's a couple other books like hers that are out now also
There's a
along
lot
the
more
same.
coming
Oh,
too.
is
I'm in a
that right?
chat. Yeah.
Oh wow, okay.
There's a
Yeah.
storm coming.
So this was my question, and then you can answer it. Is that are you kind of having a remembered self that's different from your experiencing self? Like
Mm.
say in your 20s and you have more sexual partners than you want now. Well, you're married now and so forth. But let's say maybe you did enjoy it. It was okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was good. Sometimes it was, but just like everybody has the normal ups and downs. Uh, and now you look back and go, "Oh, I'm really sorry I did that. I wish I hadn't done that." Well, but most of us look back in our 20s and go, "Oh, I shouldn't have done this or that, but whatever I did, and I learned from it. Now I'm a different person." In other words, could you be a different person? There's no fixed self. You were a different person in your 20s. Now you're in your 30s, and you're a mom, and so now you're a different person. It's like that's what I did then. This is what I'm doing now. Um, rather than saying I was wrong then and now I'm right. I don't know the answer to the question. This is just something I'm throwing out. And let me add one more piece to this. So Louise Perry was on a podcast. I forget the name of it, but it was a debate. And she was debating this woman named Ayala,
Oh, Ayala,
Aella.
yeah. She's
Ayala, you
like
know who she is.
yep, I know who she is.
She's like
She's
the
only
highest
showered
earner.
37 times in the last year.
I don't know about that part.
No, she
Okay.
went viral recently because she put all of her stats. She's one of those people that like keeps all of her stats, and everyone was like
She doesn't.
36 showers.
She doesn't shower. Why would you not
It was a
shower?
whole thing. I don't know. She likes to
Okay.
keep her like skin biome. I don't know. Okay,
Oh,
but
oh,
yeah, I know who you're
oh,
talking about.
oh, yeah, okay. Well, so and she was the highest earner on OnlyFans or Fans
Hmm.
Only, whatever that's called, like $100,000 a month or something. Anyway, so she told a story when she says, when I was in my 20s, I was sharing an apartment with like three other girls, and we did this and did that. Big fun, lots of sex, lots of guys. We talked about it, and now some of them are older, and I heard one of them saying on some show, yes, I always hated it. I always regretted it when I was doing that. And then Ayla's response was, no, you didn't. I was there. You told me you liked it. Now you're bullshitting me.
Yeah,
Anyway, so I
this
thought,
is
okay, is that the experienced self versus remembered self, or what's going on here?
That's a really interesting question, and honestly, the book I'm trying to write based on the response to that piece is teasing this out because I do feel a lot of that's one essay based on one thing that I feel now. There's a part of me that loved being a man eater, that was somewhat of a predator. My husband and I talked about this on Factory Settings this past week. Like, I was a commitment phobe. He's like, I was a proud kind of just single forever woman. And I reveled in my ability to destroy men to a certain extent. Now, how much of that was a reaction to what
Mm,
I grew up with?
mm,
And I think in that piece of saying I regret being a slut, I do regret it. A lot of
mm,
that is connected to my alcoholism and drug abuse because I don't
mm,
think there would have been as many men and as much promiscuity if I hadn't always been drinking and doing
mm,
drugs. And
mm,
so there, and I do regret it because I don't want those men to be able to say that they slept with me. So some of it is just
mm,
pride and ego.
mm, mm,
Um, and some of it is knowing more now why I was doing those things. So my question is, in the experience, what is it, the experienced self versus the
remembered self.
remembered self? But even in the remembered self, in that moment, I was lying to myself. So in
Mm.
that moment of my remembered self, I'm aware now of how much of a so who's the remembered self? Like, yeah, even if in that
Yes,
moment I
yes,
was like, "Hell yeah, I love this," but now I can say, "No, I didn't. I was lying to myself. That was a whole persona that I created as a defense to trauma."
I see, I
So
see.
how do you tease those things out?
Yeah,
That's
because now you're yeah, so yeah, I guess I forgot about the drug and alcohol component. That does complicate it.
and so does
And d
trauma
and
because
didn't
you
you have an experience where you were drugged, date rape
yeah,
or a
yep,
drug rape or something? Yeah.
yeah.
So that would yeah, okay. All right.
So how much of all of it is a reaction to what our upbringing, what I had, and I've been talking about this, just thinking about how much there were so many women in my life, and I grew up with such dysfunction with men being the model that I had, that I was like, I will never let a man do that to me. And
Mm,
so how much of my, man eater persona was a reaction to women who I respected and loved and looked up to being kind of destroyed by the men in their life.
mm.
I don't know. And how
Well,
much
Brit
of it is just me being boy crazy because I was boy crazy and enjoyed being
mm,
boy crazy. I got in
mm.
trouble in preschool for kissing a boy when he was drinking out of the water fountain. I was like
Oh my
boy
god.
crazy. I was always boy crazy. And what
That's
does
funny.
that mean? So these are the questions that
Mm.
I'm really trying to answer in a book of essays, basically.
That would be a good book. You should do a book on that.
Yeah, I'm
You know,
trying.
that uses your personal narrative and journey story, etcetera, wrapped around the research on this. There's tons of research on this,
Mm,
on sexual psychology, and there's the whole evolutionary and psych end of it. But there's critics of that think it's more culture. So you can kind of review that literature. You should do that. Not just a collection of essays. I mean, a book like Louise's book. Just a standalone book. I think that would make a great book. I mean, the timing would be perfect.
yeah, I'm so bad at the, like, research end of things. Um,
Well,
and I
Google's
don't it's
helpful for that.
no, it is. It's just, and I don't know if it's, again, this is like, am I just being lazy or am I knowing my audience, which is, um, often they just want that the personal essay, but I
Hmm.
want the personal essays to somehow be grounded in, um, the like what's going on, social commentary now. So I think it's kind of unavoidable that I end up running into research
I'll send
anyways.
you. Carol Tavris wrote a review of Louise's book, the other books in your essay. I'll send you what she wrote about this because she's older. She's I think 70 now. So she was a feminist in the late 60s and early 70s. And her one response she had was, we were warning women about this long
Yeah.
before this. That this was going to be a backlash against us.
Yeah, and I wasn't really a feminist. I wouldn't consider
Mm,
myself. I think I got swept away in that culture, but I had a feminist 10th grade English teacher who taught us, you always have that teacher who teaches you about feminism. And I was always making fun of it and saying, she's like, you're gonna set feminism back like
oh
50
my God,
years if
really?
you ever get a microphone. Yeah, because I was like, I don't understand why did women want to go out and like compete in the rat
Mm,
race, and
mm,
who cares
mm,
if a guy opens the door for you? And so I
mm.
was already kind of reacting to some of the extremes, but I got the fourth wave is really bonkers. I think there's I don't know.
Well,
But yeah, radical
if
feminists were kind of like,
yeah,
"Hey,
yeah,
this is not good."
yeah, yeah, yeah. I would just send your essay to your agent and say, shop this around to all the major trade houses as a book. I mean, you don't
Mm,
have to send anything else other than the article you wrote. That's how it happens. I mean, I know a lot of authors who just write one article and then they shop that around and go, this is a book. And publishers, if they think so, they'll snap it up. That's a hot topic. I mean, sex sells, of course, but it's the other context that we've been talking about makes it, really, I think, important. I mean, Louise Perry's book, I mean, there was just nothing. And then all of a sudden, boom, it just exploded. I think the publisher was quite surprised at the
yeah.
reception.
Yep. Well, we could talk forever. We'll just have to have you come
Yeah.
back on. This has
I,
been
I,
so fun.
I should probably try to get home and dodge the
I
boulders.
know. I'll let you go. I would ask you my 2 normal questions that I always end about your
Oh yeah,
defective
go ahead.
character. Yeah, what's your I like to see how they change with people over time. What's your biggest defective character?
Oh gosh, I'm too nice a guy. No, I'm too honest. I'm too hardworking.
People always joke about this when I ask them this
Well,
question
because
that
it
almost
is
always
I'm probably, even though I'm Mr. Skeptic, I'm probably really at the core not as skeptical as I should be.
mm,
I really can see how people get taken for cults and financial scams and things like that. Because often when I encounter things, I tend to be more open to it than I probably should be. And I probably should have a little bit of that Bridget, cynicism in my skepticism, because the world is a dark place and there are bad people, and I tend to be a little more Pollyannish rather
mm,
than in the other direction. So I'd say that is one thing. I'm very low in conflict. I don't like conflict at all, so I
I get
avoid,
that.
just in terms of personally, like dealing with my family issues and things like that. I'd pretty much rather avoid it at all costs. And
Right.
so when I know I should say something, or I want to do something, and I know the response is going to be a difficult one, and then I'll just put it off to the last second. And I can actually trace this back to my childhood, because my parents were divorced when I was 4, and so then both my parents remarried. So I ended up kind of bouncing back and forth between 2 homes. And I had great step parents, but it was still a somewhat unpleasant experience having to divide my stuff. And
I
I
understand.
gotta go. And then as I got a little older, it was every weekend, then it was every other weekend. But I do distinctly remember my mother saying, like, she wanted me to come home early on Sunday rather than Sunday evening. My dad was supposed to bring me back, but we got this family thing at 2 o'clock. Tell your dad to bring you back at noon. And so I'd get dropped off Friday after school, and I would spend like all the way till 11 o'clock on Sunday, like so afraid to say something, because I know my dad's going to be hurt or angry, and I don't want to say. And I've kind of just kept doing that.
Oh,
And
I
so
understand this.
in my relationships with women, in my marriages, and I always avoid it at the all the way to the end. And then it's like, why didn't you say something? It's like, because I didn't want to say, because of this is why.
It's funny though, that's kind of your role in the culture war too, and I always joke that I feel like a divorced kid between 2 sides, like that,
Mm.
and my being divorced, it makes me more like, "But I can see things from both sides." I do think that that's
Yeah.
interesting because I think your role in this the discourse is very much like as a peacekeeper
Hmm.
trying to keep everyone, from killing each
Hmm.
other.
Hmm. Yeah. And I'm having one of these remembered self versus experienced self, because now I sometimes I say, even though I had wonderful step parents, I wish my parents had stayed together. And
Mm.
now I'm asking myself, did I think that at the time, or am I now just looking back at it, kind of making up a story of how I thought I felt at the time when I didn't feel that way? And it's so long ago, and I'm just not sure. That's such a hard one. As you said, do you know now that you were lying to yourself then? How would you know? That's a hard one. Maybe you
Yeah.
do, but it's hard to know.
I mean, I can look and see that I was lying to myself, but if you're lying to yourself and you believe it, are you lying?
Right, right. No, not really.
Yeah. It's very confusing being a
Well, this is
human.
well, much of psychology is based on interpreting people's internal states, like this whole business of sort of unconscious racism. You whites are all
Yeah.
unconsciously racist. How would you know if it's
Yeah.
unconscious? How am I supposed to know? Well,
Yeah.
you take this little test, right? This is association test, and that's been debunked. But that was
Yes.
the idea. Yeah, we're going to tap into your secret self, and inside, even though you say you're a liberal and that you have black friends and all this, you're secretly a misogynist or a racist inside.
Yeah. That seemed very pseudoscience-y to me.
Hmm. Yeah.
And what's your biggest asset?
Oh, probably. Well, probably tenacity. That I'm not super smart and I'm not a super great athlete, but I can be tenacious, right? So like I did Race Across America, which is that 3,000-mile bike race. I can just pound along.
Wow.
I'm not the fastest guy on the bike for sure, but I can pound along at 15 miles an hour all day and night, right? So
Wow.
it's like that. And I've written 15 books. And how do you write 15 books? I don't know. I just write every day, and 40 years later, I got 15 books. It's just kind of how it
Wow.
goes. And so I'm pretty good about that. Just kind of putting my nose down and just going for it. Also, I'm pretty good at multitasking, not in the normal sense that I bounce back and forth between two things and can do them at the same time, because you can't do that. But you can switch back and forth without being too distracted. So I can start writing an essay and then there's an interruption and I can go right back to it 10 minutes later or whatever and just pick up some people can't do that. I'm pretty good at that. So I'd say that's it.
That's great. I just got really into I always joke like my Peloton is my therapy, but I was
Right.
so against like cycling, and now I started doing these like trainings. They have all these programs, and
Mm-hmm.
now as I'm like in the second program of these power zone trainings,
Mm.
and I was like, I can see how people
Oh
get
yeah,
hooked on
totally.
cycling.
Totally. Yeah.
I
Especially outdoor.
suddenly
Yeah. Yeah.
Outdoors, yeah, I can definitely yeah, it would be amazing. I mean, it's harder right now, but I've
Yeah,
been very much like, I don't get it.
for where you live, you'd probably have to drive somewhere to get away from the traffic. I
Yeah.
never like to encourage people to ride in traffic, especially in LA. It's a little risky. But there's plenty of good. If you go up to Malibu, there's just fantastic cycling up. Just up PCH, but all those canyon roads are really beautiful riding up there
Mhm.
and a good workout.
Mhm.
But yeah, whenever I'm feeling blue or depressed or sad or whatever, just tired, stressed, I just go for a bike ride and it solves it.
Yes, it is amazing how much exercise can shift your entire perspective almost
Hmm.
instantaneously.
Yeah.
Just getting that heart rate up. It's so
Yeah.
powerful.
Well, moving your body, just
Yeah.
move, get outside and move, do
Yes.
something. Yeah. Yeah.
This was so fun. I can't wait to talk to you again. Where can we find you and your book?
Okay. So skeptic.com is the webpage for the magazine and all my stuff. michaelshermer.com has all my Scientific American columns and essays and the Substack called Michael Shermer Substack and Amazon.
Or bookshop.org, which will get it from a local bookshop.
Oh, okay. That's right. Yes, I forgot about that. I should plug them. All right.
That's who I usually like to plug.
Okay.
Keep
Oh,
the
that's right.
local bookshops alive.
Yeah. Well, we have one here, Chaucer's in Santa Barbara. It's the only one of the few independents left. I try to go there and give them some business because it's a dying breed.
That's where you bought all those books behind you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I bought all my own. Right. I go in one day a week and I buy a book. I put on disguises.
You got a baseball cap. You're like, I want that book Conspiracy. I
Right.
heard about it from this guy. I think he was in 2 days ago.
There was a funny
Uh,
story back in I think it was late 80s, early 90s, where Scientologists were buying up L. Ron Hubbard books at bookstores to try to get them up the New York Times bestseller list.
um,
And then the bookstores glommed onto it. When they started getting back, they'd order more copies and they'd get back the books they had already stamped with their little symbol with the price tag or whatever of their bookstore. And they're like, wait a minute, we sold this book already.
oh,
So,
wow.
yeah, it's crazy. So in other words, Scientology was sending their members out to buy books, and then they bring them back, and then they'd resell them back to the bookstores.
Oh, geez, Louise. That kind of reminds me though that a lot of these books that are like political, you'll have those they'll have big bulk orders of the books in the
Mhm,
first
mhm.
week to kind of game the system where
Yeah.
you'll have like someone, I don't know, maybe like
Supposedly, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, they don't count bulk orders in their
oh,
sales.
interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
because they're aware of that.
Oh,
Hopefully,
okay. Hopefully.
although it's all kind of, again, back to conspiracies. It's all kind of this dark secret thing of how a book gets on that list,
I
and
know.
I don't
Got to
know.
be in the club, Michael. You
You
got
got to
to
be
be
in
in
the
the
club.
club.
I
Whatever the
often don't
club
feel.
is.
I don't feel like I'm in the club.
I don't either. It's all right though.
That's
We
right.
can
That's
start our
right.
own club.
Okay, sounds good. All right, Bridget. Nice to talk to you.
You too.
All month long on Pluto TV, stream the biggest Tyler Perry movies free. Watch your favorites like Medea's Witness Protection and Medea's Big Happy Family. Join Tyler Perry as he goes on a couples retreat with Sharon Leal in Why Did I Get Married? Or Idris Elba and Gabrielle Union in the Tyler Perry directed film Daddy's Little Girls. Plus, Pluto TV has hundreds of channels with thousands more movies and TV shows. Available on live and on demand. Download the free Pluto TV app on all your favorite devices and start streaming now. Pluto TV. Drop in, watch free.
It's time for the weekly check-in with Bridget and cousin Maggie.
Hello, Bridget.
Hello.
It has been quite a busy day for us.
It's so wild with the introduction of the child.
Uh-huh.
I've just started calling her the child.
The child. I know.
Yes, it's quite a dance we've got going on here. I was like, oh, I do understand why people need nannies.
Oh, imagine that.
Because they do the cleanup after the shit show that is learning how to eat.
Yeah. I mean, it's just
nonstop. Yep.
And you did 2 interviews and filed your column today. And I've been trying to figure out how to bust us through the YouTube algorithm all day.
We're going to bust through it by it's kind of like how we originally wanted our YouTube channel before Dumpster Fire to be just making fun of all of the YouTube tropes and doing videos that were mocking the things that are popular on YouTube.
Yeah.
I think we have to mock the popular way people
post clips
and also be serious. I mean, it'll be seriously mocking.
Yep.
But hopefully we will burst through the algorithm like the Kool-Aid Man.
I know. I refuse to accept our smothering that we are receiving right now.
I mean, I think I had a great conversation today with an upcoming guest, Ian Lara, who's hilarious and comedian. And he was saying, we were talking about when you start out in comedy and you're like, where are my accolades? That you're wondering why people can't see it. But he's like, looking back, I think, we just weren't there yet or whatever.
Yeah.
So we might look back and be like, well, no wonder.
We weren't there yet.
Wasn't the algorithm. We just sucked.
Well, I mean, I think it could be both. But I do think the algorithm is playing a part because just looking at where our numbers were versus where they are now and how like our engagement is still the same or higher, which is supposed to spread you across the algorithm. Like our Dumpster Fire got 300 comments and it's just like not matching up where those videos that get 300 comments usually have 60,000 views at least, it just
the ratios are off.
So that to me says the algorithm really doesn't like us for whatever reason. We say a lot of controversial things. Of course, it's
not controversial. It's funny and the way normal people talk.
I know, but it's controversial in this day and age to put it out there publicly. I know. We were saying this the other day. Like, I'm like, this is how people talk amongst themselves.
Yeah.
Just no one says it publicly anymore. We're just the only idiots out there saying it publicly.
We were doing one of the segments on just how ridiculous it is that you like saying that a violent male rapist shouldn't be in a woman's prison is controversial.
I know.
That's somehow controversial and how ridiculous it is. And how can you fight that if all of the technological platforms are in lockstep that is that's obscene, bigoted thing to say. And I was saying to Maggie, I'm like, are we bigots? You start questioning yourself. Am I a bigot for thinking a male rapist shouldn't be in a female prison? That's the danger of this stuff. Just because
he self-identifies as a woman in order to get out of the male prison?
Yeah, Constantine had a really funny tweet that was like, has there been a study done on why gender dysphoria strikes in a courtroom or something like that? When a man is in a courtroom, he suddenly becomes gender dysphoric.
Yeah, I loved this episode with Michael Shermer. It's a really fascinating conversation. You guys kept up with each other well. mentally. At times I was like, jeepers, creepers. They're talking about shit I barely understand.
I feel like I can't keep up with anyone, but I do feel like the pregnancy brain fog is
lifting.
Yeah, a little bit. A lot more than like the earlier months, 4, 5, 6, where I felt like couldn't find words.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's great. He's so reasonable.
He really is. And just thoughtful and analytical. Like just the way he took that question about gender and kind of broke it down and gave his response and was just kind of like, here's what I think. It was a very rational response.
And he's just a very sweet man. He's just a sweetheart. Yep. And then at night, I try to do Right Club, which is booming.
Yeah.
It keeps growing.
That's awesome.
I'm proud of myself. I did 31 days.
That's impressive.
And I've had the inclination to cheat. And last night I almost did because I was on deadline and had to finish a piece. Right as I finished that piece, I was like, all right, I'm going to do my Right Club. And then the child woke up and I had to get her back to sleep, which took like 45 minutes to an hour in that instance because she was just distraught for some reason. I think she maybe had a nightmare. And then I was like, I have to do this prompt and I was going to cheat. And because I have all these old prompts from when we've done this before.
Oh.
And then I was looking and the one that I picked to cheat on was me contemplating cheating on that prompt and refusing to do it. And I was like, damn it. I've thwarted myself.
Yeah.
I was like, I wanted to cheat on this prompt.
I mean, when you're up till 1, 2 in the morning doing these prompts, when you have to get up with the baby and have a full day, and like that's a lot. You're doing a lot.
And then I'm like up for another freaking 35 minutes trying to find the right image.
I know. And then posting it. I know. It's just all day.
So stupid. I was like, what am I doing?
But Right Club is doing really well and I love it and people love it. And
people write full on essays. I love it. I really want to do some kind of competition or something. Not even a competition, just maybe I pick a few of the prompts and read them.
Oh, that's a good idea.
You know, just every month I round up some of my favorite responses to a prompt and then I read them or something. I don't know. That sounds like more work.
Because we don't have enough to do.
I'm like, how can I make myself more work? No, I'm going to have to read every single prompt. Yeah.
And then you were telling me though, you just started watching Band of Brothers.
Well, because I made a promise to Jaron because he always makes fun of me and thought that he was going to divorce me when he found out that I'd never seen it. But I was like, I've just seen so many clips from it that I feel like I can't handle it because I hate movies like that. They're so sad.
Band of Brothers, I don't know. There's sad parts to it, but maybe you've just seen the saddest parts because it's so good.
No, we're 3 and Jaron's seen it multiple times. I totally understand why everybody loves it. It's amazing. And so well done and just so crazy. And I think about it helps me because I have all of our grandpa's letters. And I think about what those guys were. It really puts it in perspective what they were living. Yeah. Just jumping out of those planes into it's that opening scene.
I know.
Or that opening episode is just it's so crazy. They were another breed.
Yeah.
Even in one of the opening, I can't remember if it was episode 1 or 2. I think it was 2 when the opening guys were talking and he said, you know, 4 guys at home killed themselves because they couldn't go to war.
Ugh.
And I was like,
damn.
Yeah, different mentality.
Different era that the country was united with a single purpose.
Yeah. It's really good.
Yeah.
It's really good. It was very hard for me at first to not see Ross as Ross.
He's so great in that role.
I couldn't take it seriously at first. It kind of broke the because did that come out after he was Ross?
I think so. Yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Yeah, but he's really great in that role.
That's the hard thing about being in one of those sitcoms. that is so iconic. You're just always that person.
Mm-hmm.
That's why Larry David did it right, because Larry David, from what I've seen in real life, is exactly the same person
as he is in Curve.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good. I like it. What were you going to say about it?
Oh, it's just I love it. I mean, I've seen it multiple times. It's so good. It's just so, yeah, it is. It stirs a lot of emotions, you know. You definitely cry during it, but it's just so well done. And so the stories, the way it's told, the way it's shot, the way all of it, it's just a really beautifully done
It holds up.
thing. Yeah.
That's for sure. Yeah, the guy, the lead in it, who's in Billions, and what was the other one that I love?
Homeland. He's
Homeland,
in Homeland.
yeah.
He was in this British series that I loved. He's a really good actor.
Yeah, it was hard for me to overcome him being the like Homeland guy for a minute too. It's just been nice to just have some downtime and just let my brain not necessarily relax with Band of Brothers, but at least it's like,
but just have something else to focus on, like not thinking, you know. I do the same thing where I'm just like, I have more work to do, but I have to stop and just like decompress here.
Yeah.
Because
it's been pretty flat out, and I think it will help if we can get ahead.
If we can get ahead, I think we can. It will even out at some point. Just get new. We're trying to just tweak our systems and get new systems in place and figure some stuff out. There's always a learning curve.
There is that question: is there a way to do this better?
Mm-hmm.
Which I like.
Mm-hmm. And there are certainly ways we can be doing what we're doing better in all areas.
I'm so tired. I did a nice media hit today, and the guy, when he was listing all the things that I did on the Substack and elsewhere, I was like, okay, yeah, I am doing a lot.
No wonder I'm so tired.
I've never been so tired in my life. I love it though.
It is. It's all a labor of love, which is nice.
And honestly, the writing prompts do pay dividends.
Mm-hmm.
I will say it is that muscle that when I had to sit down last night and focus and bang out that piece that I needed to bang out because I was on deadline, because we chose a topic like 3 days ago. My editor said, okay, maybe we need to give you a little more time. It's not quite fair because suddenly a baby can be sick or up at night and throw things off. And I was able to just sit down and focus, and all of a sudden 1,600 words came out.
Yeah.
So it was way over the limit of what I needed.
Yeah.
But that was just from that discipline of every night sitting down and writing.
Yep.
It wasn't something that I was I just put my headphones on, listened to some Fish.
She's been super into Fish again lately.
Because they're coming to the Hollywood Bowl for 4 nights, and I'm threatening to go.
I don't understand why Fish gets such a bad rap. Like, why? I don't understand it.
I think it's more the culture of just stoner, hippie people who followed them around.
Okay.
They kind of picked up where the dad left off, and it's. I think the more fandom is what gives it the bad rap, not necessarily. And then, I mean, he was a heroin addict, one of the lead singers, and
well, so were many of us.
Who amongst us? I love them though. I still love. And then Jaron was like, "Who's bigger, Dave Matthews or Fish? Like, who opens for who?" And I was like, "That's not even a thing. It's not even a real question."
I love how outraged you get.
I love Dave Matthews.
I
still.
do too.
Even if we lose listeners for my admission of love.
Even Jaron admitted that if at all God's gaze upon us falls, it's with a mischievous grin. Look at him was a good line in the last Factory Settings podcast.
I was so excited because Adrienne Appalucci has been getting the accolades she rightfully deserves because she opened for Louis C.K. and his Back to the Garden special and just crushed.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
She's so funny.
I have the set if you want to see it.
I do want to see it.
It's just so good.
Okay. Let's go watch that now.
Let's go watch Adrienne. And if you haven't, you should check her out, and her set on the Louis C.K. special, which I think is only available until the 17th, is spectacular. We're not ending on Doomsday. It's a good week.
Tune in next week for another riveting episode that will change your life, help you get out of your own way, and solve all the world's problems. I want to thank our composer, Jared Elias, my co-producer and cousin, Maggie, and all of you out there listening. This has been Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Phetasy. I'm Bridget Phetasy, and you're welcome. It's the dumbest line.